It just sits here for the whole meeting. I don't know what's on there.
I wonder if we.
I sent it. I know it's got.
Office. It's disconnected from Wi-Fi. Let's.
We can sit down.
Steve, hi, Mark.
Like it's frozen. I'm still in the morning.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
To help me through the car.
Yeah.
Here's the folder.
Passed away. Yeah, she was.
I think about it too.
Oh, I saw it. Different smell, I thought it. No idea.
Here's.
Well, I know about the. And she's still got chickens.
Maybe just press it and see if it'll. I don't think we set it up. I haven't assigned one. iPad 2.
Yeah, for the. But it was, this was for the. For the photos. I don't know whether it went off.
Okay, there it goes.
UG isn't here. I mean, I can look on my phone.
Okay.
He's not here.
It's not.
It's, Steve's not here.
Oh, I was asking if we have the agenda.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the City Laguna Beach Planning Commission and joint meeting with the City Council Promenade Subcommittee of February 26th to order at this time. Can we now get a roll call, please?
Yes, and first I would like to announce that Chair Sadler and Commissioner Goldman are not present today. And I'll proceed with roll call. Commissioner Whiten,
Here.
Commissioner Dubin,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg.
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission regarding any items not on the agenda. So in other words, any items not regarding the promenade, since that's the only thing we're talking about tonight. But within the subject matter of the Planning Commission, no action may be taken on an off-agenda item unless authorized by law. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless extended for good cause by the Planning Commission. Is there anybody who would like to make a public communication? Please, not on the promenade. Okay, no. Okay, is there, we have nothing on the consent calendar, so we do not need to take action on the consent calendar. So we will now go to the remainder of the agenda to agenda item number 1, which is the only 4.1, which is the only agenda item we have tonight. So Louis, if you would like to go ahead and proceed with your
Chair,
report.
for a moment, Chair,
Yes.
I just want to make a disclosure that I did meet with SWA.
Okay, thank you. And then I should disclose that I also met with SW. So, okay, Louis, take it away.
Good evening, City Council Ad Hoc Committee and Planning Commission. It's a pleasure to be able to kick off the review of the Promenade Forest concept design. The proposed agenda for tonight includes brief project updates, followed by SWA's presentation of the revised conceptual design. After that, opportunity for public comment before bringing the discussion back to the Ad Hoc Committee and Planning Commission to discuss the key design elements. So before turning it over to SWA, I'd like to share a few important project updates. A public hearing has been scheduled for March 19th, where the Planning Commission will formally consider the project design review and coastal development permit, offering another opportunity for public input. The city has completed its CEQA analysis for the project and will be part of the Planning Commission's considered action that evening on March 19th. We expect to receive an arborist report shortly, which will provide additional insights into the project. The Ad Hoc Committee and city staff recently met with the Department of Alcohol, Beverage, and Control, known as ABC, and we also have an upcoming meeting scheduled with the California Coastal Commission. And as discussed during the joint meeting with the City Council, the goal has been to secure the necessary entitlements for the project by April, and happy to report, as of now, we remain on track to meet that deadline. And with that, I'm happy to turn over to Sean from SWA for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. We'll go ahead and begin the presentation. While we're waiting, I'll introduce myself. For those of you who may not know, from last time, I'm Sean O'Malley, Managing Principal of our Laguna Beach office. I'm a landscape architect. We're located here in Laguna, just a couple blocks away. I'd like to say that, first of all, what we're going to present to you or discuss this evening is first a recap of kind of where we left off last time. And secondly, kind of go through a series of detail options with you that pertain to the details, of course, of forest at Laguna. And so as part of that recap, I want to remind us that the first question we always ask ourselves of a project of this kind of importance that's so dear to our hearts is, what is Laguna Beach? What defines Laguna? What comes to mind, of course, are these three main ideas: the ocean, the landscape, and the arts. And I want to remind ourselves the last time we talked about forest being something that's simple, timeless, but also flexible. Because essentially we're designing a stage for you, the community, to design over time and improve and experiment with. And that this space, I think, as I mentioned, is really the heart and soul of this community. It's kind of where we gather on a daily basis, and it's also a destination, I think, potentially for visitors from around the world. So we have to really balance those two issues as well. And it was kind of a long process, but it was actually a very fulfilling one. And I want to thank you, the community, for being a part of that process, because I always say that, we just hold the pen, and these are your ideas that we put down on paper. And over time, we coalesced kind of an approach to forest that these watercolors now start to represent. And what we see here is a much broader, more a wider access point for circulation, kind of a promenade, if you will, on the edges of the retail. So those people can move freely. You can see the existing trees are all kept where they are today. And that's really one of the most important goals of this place, is really to celebrate those existing trees, the eucalyptus polyanthumus, Silodalogum, and others that are out there today, and work with those trees as best we can, but then broaden that area along the face so that we can move around those trees. Essentially, this is about 15 feet wide, was what you're looking at. And then there's a garden at both ends of this space to help define that space, provide a barrier for alcohol and beverage control, which is also an issue of ours, but also, most importantly, to celebrate the landscape of Laguna Beach. We see this as our living room, and when we look at our gardens here in Laguna, they're often graced with, plants of all kinds, California natives, and also tropicals and so forth, but plants that are alive, that bring in hummingbirds and butterflies and really provide life. And we want to bring that life to this space. And part of that life is also providing a variety of seating. In the immediate foreground on the left, you see a bench, and then beyond the garden, in that softer paving area, you see a series of Adirondack chairs. So we're going to walk you through a series of options for the seating as well. And this next slide really shows the idea of a larger gathering space that's really predominantly paving, this brick herringbone, again, building on the strength of Laguna Beach in all ways for those materials. The brick herringbone is part of those materials, and there's a few others as well. This space is also can be a flexible, large performance area. It's more located towards the center and closer to Pacific Coast Highway in the distance. You're looking towards the ocean there. And also as a part of this approach, making sure we have adequate dining tables and so forth for the restaurants, and then other kinds of seating we'll go into in great detail. And also the lighting is very important, and providing lighting accents in the trees that help to define the character of this place. Laguna is beautiful for a lot of different reasons, and one of the ways is its asymmetry, its organic nature, its imperfection. And I think that's one of the things that makes this space so beautiful today, is how those trees really meander through. And we want to even emphasize that a little bit more, and you'll see here in a moment how we can do that. This next image is taken from the edge of Pacific Coast Highway, looking towards forest and over the top again of a garden, which helps provide some of that what we call the ABC barrier, but again, celebrating the garden and landscape qualities of Laguna Beach. You see some soft porous paving there with, again, the Adirondacks, and different things happening, whether it's a seasonal art event. In this case, that's what's shown here. But again, it's really capturing the quality, I think, and the spirit of what defines Laguna Beach. And now here we have the plan that we had left you with last time. And we had some really excellent comments from all of you, including the Planning Commission, that we'll address this evening. And this plan shows both the existing trees in the lighter green, that's a bigger circle, and the smaller circles at the bottom, and a couple, there's one on the left side there, are some of the proposed trees. And there's gardens beneath those trees, both in the gardens at the ends, and there's also roughly 10 feet by 10 foot square gardens beneath the new trees, as opposed to using tree grates for the new trees. So tree grates will go in detail, but those are utilized predominantly just for the existing trees. So in all ways, we thought we had some great feedback here. We could see some of the dining tables on the north side with some pots to provide flexibility for where those tables are located. The pots help provide some barriers around those dining areas, help define those dining areas. Yeah, and then there's some paving here happening, and of course the herringbone paving, but also the idea of a porous paving at the ends as a part of the garden elements and also in the core. And that paving also is essential too to defining who we are. And now, very briefly, I want to point out two things that are different about this plan, which start to take into account some of the comments. I'm going to walk through those comments in greater detail here, but just very briefly, these two things are, number one, the trees. We've added more trees, which is one of the comments we received, and that's very doable and still keeping the view towards Pacific Coast Highway down the core, and that has a meandering quality you'll see, but also that we've added more seating specifically on the south side, more dining tables, not dining tables, but common area tables, I would say, and then different seating types. And we'll show you what those types might be. And so we have a few design items for discussion, and we'll start with the trees because that really is one of the main framework elements that defines who we are, extremely important. ABC devices refer to the alcohol and controlling that alcohol and creating barriers for this space so that there's more flexibility and freedom within this space to act as one regulated space. And the seating in terms of quantity and type, pavement, different ideas there. The heritage of Laguna elements, that's extremely important because that speaks to one of the three tenements of who we are, the arts of Laguna. And so how can we bring the arts and celebrate the arts, which truly makes Laguna different from all the other coastal communities in Southern California, and for that matter, in most of California. The restaurant seasonal protection, the idea of heat and shade, right? South and north retail views, how can we open up those a little bit more than we have today? Because that's important for the retailers and the restaurants as you drive by PCH and you look down that quick few seconds of time we have to glimpse and see what's happening and to try and bring you into this space. Idea of a central plaza element, a common gathering meeting place. Well, some details about the bollards and of course the drainage. So we're going to start with the trees. And on the top option, we have an idea about tree species. And on the top, we see the existing ficus trees kind of in a darker color and the proposed, both the existing and proposed eucalyptus in the kind of the lighter green. And what the top option also shows is that there's more of those proposed eucalyptus trees. In fact, I think there was 2 or 3 more in this plan, right, Evan? From what we currently show. And those occur mainly on the south side, kind of drifting through in this meandering quality. In the bottom option, option 2, perhaps there's an idea of instead of having more eucalyptus, we instead have a couple of large heritage trees that could be kind of an oak tree. And those could be very beautiful and broad and big. We can get some very big sizes on day one with lighting and so forth. The strength, I think, of option 1, using the silver dollar gum, Eucalyptus polyanthemus, is that's what it is today. And I think there is something to be said about, building upon the strength and character of forest. And if it was all that same kind of a tree, except for the 2 existing ficus at the ends, I think that would be something that we could really celebrate that space. Although either option, I think, could be really beautiful and a wonderful place to be. Then the next plan has to do with the quantity of trees. That last one was about the species. And the option 1 on the top is the older plan that you saw previously, with the 3 darker green trees being the new eucalyptus that we added. The 2 dashed ones are the ones that we had removed because of health and safety concerns. And those will be looked at by the arborist, and we'll see that report soon. And then option 2 is the idea of bringing in 2 or 3 more additional eucalyptus that I just described to you. And then option 3 is maybe a more heavier version of that. Again, trying to keep that view corridor to PCH clear and open down the middle, but still having that meandering quality. And there's certainly enough room to make any of these options work and be a quite beautiful and memorable place. Now we're going to launch into, I'm going to just keep going here into some of these details that we've been thinking about. And in blue on the top, this idea of using tree grates, which is really, we think, very important for the health of the existing trees, because we want to lift the traffic off of the root base, at the base of that trunk. And as you know, as you walk along Forest today, it's really only about a 5x5 area, right? And in blue, we're showing an 8-foot by 8-foot square, and that's what the two images on the bottom represent. These two options. On the left, option one being a more contemporary option, and on the right being something that really speaks to the idea of landscape, a landscape pattern perhaps. And there's also plenty more options on the tree grades, but these are two that we thought, two different kinds of approaches that could work really well in this space. And now we'll talk a little bit about the idea of providing those barriers for ABC. The first point is this idea of signage that we see here. There's these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations of these relatively small signs. 7-inch by 11 is what's required. It says no alcohol beyond this point. Very simple. And that just alerts somebody to they can't really walk with a beverage in hand beyond those points once they're inside the space. And that includes the alley next to Bouchard's on the north side of that little red dot. So those are just locations for that signage. They kind of happen on the edge of the walk in the garden somewhere, so it's not a trip hazard or anything. In addition to that, we can have the bollards that I mentioned last time, which provides adequate edge as well along the new curbs that we poured along the sides. So together with the bollards that are 6 feet on center and the red signage, that seems to be an acceptable approach by the ABC department, and allowing this space to function holistically as for alcohol in all ways. Now we're going to touch on some different seating options. And I want to begin with a new seating option on the south side of the space. And you'll see a diagram here in a moment, I think, of where these are located. But this is the idea of what we call lounge seating. A couple different options. One on the left is a little more, has more stronger rectangular geometries, and the one on the right being a softer geometry. Both of them would work quite well, but they have a coffee table. It kind of is very similar to the kind of lounge seating that we're currently using in a lot of the Irvine Company projects and other spaces where you provide users with a choice, not just dining, not just benches, but another kind of seating that's maybe not as low as an Adirondack. It's a little bit higher, so you can get in and out of. So that's definitely an option. And now we look at some of the diagrams for that. On the top, we have the previous option one plan that you saw last time we talked. In green are the clustered dining tables, which basically represent what's currently there today. And then also on the top diagram, we see what looks like pink little rectangles. Those are also dining tables with a common area dining tables. And then in yellow, those are the Adirondacks, which appear at the end gardens and also inside the central porous paving area. And then tucked into some of the corners beneath the trees around some of the garden elements. So the garden always kind of helps protect those movable Adirondack chairs as well. And the black lines are wood benches. We'll talk about the material here in a moment. You can see the quantities that we had earlier in option one, 36 dining tables, 21 Adirondack, 14 common area tables, and 5. So in option two, we said, okay, one of the comments we received was, can we do more? Absolutely. That's what, this is a stage and it has that flexibility to do more. So we have added more of the green dining area tables. In this case, it would be the for pairs that are designed for the edges against the face of the building on the north side there of the space. In option two, you see those linear green rectangles. Those are the cafe kind of style tables that are up against the edge of the building, kind of relieve some of the pressure of the diners out in the central space. Now there's a blue square, and those represent the lounge seating that you saw earlier. And then, of course, now you've even added more Adirondacks. You can see those kind of starting to really populate the space. I also mentioned that the benches that we're proposing here are almost double or triple what you currently have today in terms of their length. The average bench today is about 10 feet long. Some of these benches are about 22 to 25 feet long. And I'll show you what those can look like here in a moment. Different options. And the next slide has to do with the dining tables and chairs. We think this is a very elegant solution. Now I'll talk about the materials. Our experience has been, and these are actually from some of our projects, that the wood, ipe wood, which is a tropical hardwood, holds up very well over time, and also is cooler to sit on in the summertime and warmer in the wintertime. But we've also included, this is important, we have a kind of a metal frame which adds to its durability. And this has a nice, simple, elegant look to it. And also speaks a little bit to the progressive nature of Laguna Beach. Everything doesn't have to be very traditional. I think some cases we should really, not be afraid to be a little more contemporary in our expression of our furniture, which I think is a little bit who we are. This next option is a little bit softer in its approach, but it's basically using the same materials of wood and metal frame, both large dining and cafe seating. In the next slide here, I'll press that again, see if that. Oh, there we go. Okay. Has to do with the Adirondacks. So on the option one, it shows a very clean, a little bit of a contemporary Adirondack, which again, it's a tropical hardwood, very durable. It's heavy. It's not going to be taken, picked up and moved off site, we don't think. And then the right idea of integrating color into that kind of a chair, but also perhaps this one's a little more traditional in nature, option two. Yeah, color and wood, I think, is the options. Now we'll go into benches. This first series has to do with some of the benches we used at River Street in San Juan Capistrano, which are these heavy timber elements. They're again very durable, speaks to the organic, I think, quality and heritage of Laguna Beach somewhat. They can happen both backless, you see, and then also with a back on the bottom and right-hand side. Option two is a little more traditional in nature. And this one I think is really attractive to me because particularly the bench on the left side there speaks a little bit, that board quality. It reminds me a little bit of the hewing of the old surfboards in Laguna. And of course, a metal frame that gives it its durability. It's simple, it's elegant, and I think it is timeless in its approach, and also a bench perhaps in the upper right, or that kind of corresponds in its design. Option three is a little more traditional in nature as a back bench, has a little bit more curve to it. These are actually from a project in New York City on the left, so they're very durable. And there's also, matching benches that the manufacturer can supply for us as well. And we have different choices in terms of the color of the metal frame, from black to silver, to even a color if we so choose. Now we're going to jump a little bit to paving. And I think this idea of porous paving is very important for the quality and the definition of Laguna Beach. And that, to me, it speaks to this, again, this organic quality of this village, and would really separate and make this a unique destination apart from, Dana Point, San Clemente, Newport Beach, and other coastal communities in the area. If we look back at that original painting we saw when we started this discussion, the plein air painting, that was just basically a dirt street, right? With the eucalyptus and the ivy geranium kind of moving at the base. And that was very inspirational for us, because I think we can actually do that, at least in a limited way here, if we're smart about that porous paving, so it becomes less of a maintenance issue. But that porous paving can be maintained, I think, effectively. We're using the pebble option right now on River Street in San Juan, but decomposed granite compacted is also an equally attractive option. Let me show you one of my favorite spaces in Madrid, Spain. This is actually, I think, 3 different restaurants that have their dining areas out here in this incredible view in a DG terrace. And it's a long waiting list to actually dine here. So it's something that I think we can do here in Laguna. Why not? Okay. The field of paving, there needs to be a common field that really ties us together. I think it helps to maximize the feeling of the space if it's simple. Again, we're going to have a lot, furniture and so forth on top of this paving, so it doesn't have to be too complicated. And the herringbone is a pattern that we see repeated throughout the village. On the left, option 1 is kind of what we see today. Option 2 incorporates a little bit more of a play with the mortar joint and perhaps even an exploration of an earthier color. And that this is kind of a smeared mortar joint, which has a more organic, I think, artistic feel to it. And I think it's a very beautiful look, option 2, personally. And of course, the crazy quilt on the right, I think we're going to do that regardless on the ends and rebuild what we have today so they're safe and with, harder brick and so forth. That's such a strong definer of Laguna Beach. Now, what we call the heritage of Laguna. One of the big 3 tenets, ocean, landscape, art. So this is the art component. And I think it's important that we express this in some way and start at least plan for that. And it doesn't have to be designed by SWA. This idea is the idea of these bronze plaques that speak to the individuals, the artists of Laguna Beach and the heritage that helped establish this very unique community by the sea. And you think of in Boston, the Freedom Trail as an example, right? All around the country, you see those kind of examples where you can bed something in the paving that celebrates the founders of this great village. And also in the same vein, again, this could be a paving element. To be determined and designed by perhaps an artist commission. But the idea of, we exist in this really unique context. Behind us, these incredible oak-studded hills, and out here in the coast, in these beautiful coves filled with kelp forests, right, just beneath the waves. And there's something about that connection, I think, that needs to be celebrated, including, of course, the sea life in some way. And it would, again, add to the uniqueness of this place and set Laguna Beach apart, I think, from other communities. Again, one of our goals and one of our very important goals here is to make Laguna Beach a destination and find those catalysts that allow it to be a destination. I mentioned earlier the idea of shading, and so in blue, what we've done is add on the top, of course, we have the idea of umbrellas that exist between the tables. These are movable umbrellas. And we also want to bring more of those to the bottom, the south side as well. And this is some examples of what that shading can look like, both in terms of shape, whether or not they're hexagonal shape or square, but also in color, whether or not they're just white, like in the lower left, which would be very beautiful and simple, or some accent colors like the pale blues of the sea, or bright yellow of some of the the artwork here in Laguna Beach. Equally important in the wintertime, of course, the idea of heat. So we have been thinking about how we might be able to provide that protection. 3 options. The idea of mounted heat bars. These are very slender bars that are only 4 inches wide, and they happen in different lengths that can be incorporated within our attached to our poles that we currently have, and we're adding more of those poles as we described last time along the edges of the space, the main central space. In the middle, the idea of freestanding heat, but this is a very elegant solution. They don't have to be as heavy as you see today. In fact, very, very different. You almost don't even notice this except for the base, right? And that arm, that curving arm could be whatever geometry we want to create. And so we can work with the manufacturer to create something very unique for Laguna Beach. Option 3, the pendant utilizes the idea of the poles on the sides with a cable system, and these pendants hang almost like lights to provide heat at specific table dining areas. Seasonal protection. This is the idea of mounted heating on the top, option 1, freestanding heating, option 2 in the middle, and then pendant heating on the bottom using the cable system. There's also the idea in terms of, the beautiful seacoast breezes we have. Sometimes they can be a little daunting in the wintertime. So we have this thought of providing screens that are about 5 feet high on the left side of the table clusters. So you see here in red, these lines. And those lines could exist as a glass panel that's slid into poles that are set into sleeves and brass sleeves. So we can remove them, in the spring when things warm up a bit. The right-hand side is the idea of a canvas panel that's more lightweight, and we can incorporate color into that as well. So different ways of providing seasonal protection in the wintertime, both heat and wind protection. Next slide has to do with opening up those retail views, both from Pacific Coast Highway on the left and Glen Eyrie on the right. And the red circles are the existing trees we currently have. And I think we might want to, I was out there looking at from PCH and Glen Eyrie, we have an opportunity to limb up some of the existing ficus trees. I think that are probably most of our concern, to open up those views to the retailers. We want to do everything we can to support their business, of course. And also in the evening, when you drive by, the use of those trees as lighting elements themselves with lanterns and beautiful accent lighting. So when you're driving, you go, wow, what is going on in there? That's the idea. And so that's an important part of retailing, is to draw people in, and to that window along PCH is extremely important. And also, of course, the shrub planting, keeping the shrubs relatively low, so we have that visibility through the trees. Now, another detail, which is equally as important for safety, we currently have some big planter boxes where that green line is located. We want to replace those planter boxes just with a simple jersey barrier, which is a little more elegant and square in form, not the kind you're used to with the big fat base. The Caltrans has different designs. This is one of them. And we would just simply cover that jersey barrier with a ficus vine. We could probably get that jersey barrier to look like a hedge within a few years. So that's the idea. It looks like a green hedge right along there with a barrier hidden behind it. The idea of a gathering place within this gathering place, right? The Bouchards you see on the right-hand side of the alley in the middle, on the north side, as you go down that axis, when if you walk that alley and you see something that's very important at the terminus of that axis in that perhaps DG courtyard area, and that's a vertical element. And we're exploring what that vertical element could be. Of course, building upon one of the many artists here, one of which is Marlowe, you're all familiar with, who does these incredible tile pieces of columns. So maybe it's a vertical column, maybe the column incorporates water, like you see in Avalon here in the image in the upper right, or that water is done in a very intimate way and just disappears into a trench grate at the base of that column. So it could be one just without the water, or it could incorporate water as kind of a decision point as well. This is the idea of the bollards, which is part of that ABC barrier, but most importantly, part of the idea of safety, right? To prevent vehicles from coming in. And there's removable bollards, 3 of them in the middle on each side for fire truck access on the ends. We want those bollards to be very simple and almost disappear in the landscape along the curb edge. So perhaps a dark charcoal gray in this case. They don't want to call attention to themselves. And then, of course, the drainage idea. And these 2 blue lines we touched on last time we met, where the water will drain into those 2 blue lines, which are trench drains, then connect to the existing drainage beneath forest down the middle. And those trench drains would be about 1 foot wide, and they're easily accessible for maintenance, but they could be of different designs, and that design should be coordinated with the tree grate, right? Whether it's a contemporary design or more circular like you saw before. There's different ways that we can look at that, the trench drain, so it's part of that family.
So is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it. We've got that. We just want to close with kind of where we are today. This is an improved, upgraded master plan, incorporating more trees, more seating, more landscape elements along the base of the new trees, and all the other details that we just spoke of. So thank you very much.
So thanks, Sean. That was a very well-organized presentation. I mean, normally we would have questions now from the commission, but I think if it's okay, we would defer those till after public comment. So then we can have questions and discussions on each one of these. I'll just make the scope of this meeting is actually fairly narrow tonight. It was a result of a request by the city council last week or the week before that we meet and have a little bit additional discussion on kind of a number of the variables within the promenade. And so tonight the topic is not should we have a promenade or not. It's not should we have a hybrid or not, even though I know there's varying opinions out there in the community. This is a very focused discussion on specifically on these 10 items to give SWA some definitive direction on them tonight so that they can take those back and go to the next level of iteration and then come back in another couple of weeks with with the next level plan for review by the Planning Commission. So we will open it up to a public hearing at this time. You have 3 minutes to speak, but we would, again, ideally you would be speaking about your preferences or thoughts on the content that you heard tonight in terms of these specific items. When you come up and speak, you can certainly ask questions, yes. So we'll open the public hearing at this point. So if you'd like to speak, please step forward and make sure that you sign your name on the clipboard on the table, either before or after you speak.
Fill in the rest later. My name is Alice Brown, and I'm really curious as to whether the street as it is now, will it be dug up?
So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take your questions. Louis is going to record them, and then after everyone has spoken, we'll go back and address all the questions at one time.
Okay, I need to know how long it's going to take for the whole promenade to materialize the way you visualize it. Personally, I wish y'all would also incorporate Ocean Avenue and Broadway to really make it a lively downtown. It's already an historic district, and I don't see that any of what you've just said is going to really make a material difference, except that it's going to destroy the local businesses that have been there for, I don't know, decades, including Bouchard's, including us, the shoe store, the candy store. We've been there for, since the 40s, I think. We ourselves have been there over 30 years. What has not been addressed at all is all these wonderful people coming to Laguna Beach. Where are they going to park? I mean, we had 0-day sales in the rain with all of what's sitting in front of us. Nice tables, nice umbrellas, no people, just dead at night for the past since COVID. So how is all this going to just bring people in with, beautiful umbrellas and plants and all that, which all sounds very great, but there also has to be excitement. The art galleries, I think more emphasis has to be put on performing arts and events, so people come to participate. I don't want people drinking in front of the store. Already we have incidents about that. But we will close, because if you'll close down the street, we're dead. Already our business has halved since COVID. We have the figures. We can show it to the City Planning Commission, to the mayor, to whoever's interested. And I personally feel that somebody has to pay attention to the local businesses, especially in where they will park when they shop. Nobody's addressing that at all. That's what I have to say. I'm
Thank you.
very concerned about the parking.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Leek Hoskins, Laguna Beach resident. I noticed when you said the crazy quilt, and that's what I think we're going to do. I don't like the crazy quilt at all because the promenade is already cramped with this and that and umbrellas and condos. And now the surface you're walking on, yeah, it's really going to make you crazy. And secondly, I'm not in favor of planting eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus tree limbs break for no reason at all. They're loaded with oil. When there is a fire, before the fire even gets to them, the oil explodes. So let's look a little bit more at the oak trees. They're more fire resistant. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mark Christie, lifetime resident, own 2 retail stores and 3 buildings. I think it's amazing. I think you did a great job. I don't think there are bad options amongst the various scenarios that you put out there. I think it's kind of fun. Let's let our freak flag fly a little bit. Let's make it that place. Let's make it like the patio at the ranch. Let's make it that place where if you don't have plans, you know, you can just get in your car and go, and there'll be something cool happening. And I think this is something to build on, whether it's Ocean Avenue. I totally agree with, you know, letting it spread over there, but we've got to start somewhere. And I think this is that place to start. And I think the energy will migrate out. Let's do it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Charmaine from Shoe Seller. I've talked to some of you before. Beautiful, beautiful renderings. Really enjoyed looking at that. It's fascinating about Laguna Beach. You know, it's undergone this massive evolution over the last 100 years. From this isolated community to this vibrant, quirky, as you pointed out, creative, artistic community. Part of what makes Laguna Beach so special, or at least from my perspective and the perspective of many people I've spoken with, is that Laguna Beach is not just about the creative. It's also about supporting the creative spirit, the independent spirit, and small business. I am concerned about a few things. I'm more curious about replacing benches as an example. The benches look beautiful, and I really like the wood you're choosing. But it made me think some of this could be replacing history to celebrate history, because there are things intact that are historical, and as you mentioned, heritage, very important. But we usually put up plaques for what's gone. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to, or I'd like people to consider, instead of eliminating or erasing things to celebrate what's gone when it's still there, to actually find ways to celebrate what's already there. I second my mom. I am concerned about the closure of the stores, so I do hope that more stores are made aware. I did a short poll. Nobody knows how long the stores are going to be closed. That seems to be very important because stores will go out of business if they're closed for a period of time, and people who own these stores have lives and support systems, and so they need to be able to make arrangements to either, well, find another way for people to get into the store. I mean, if this is going to take months. And I'm not sure, based on these actually really beautiful renderings, why everything has to be torn up to make that happen. The vision seems to be taking the integrity of Laguna Beach into account, both artistically and naturally. But it does seem like part of this is pushing forward without really consulting the community or the locals about the tearing up, the tearing down. Laguna Beach is a destination. The first time I was here in 1985, I couldn't believe it. It's like, Laguna Beach is like no place else anywhere. And I know we all feel that way. I know everybody just wants what's best for Laguna. But I do hope we can bring a few more people into the conversation and perhaps consider how to mitigate some of the consequences on people who spent their whole lives trying to make Laguna Beach as beautiful, creative, passionate, and independent as it has been for a century. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mark Cohen with 230 Forest Avenue. I just want to say thank you very much, Sean, Mark, and Sue for all the work and effort that has gone into everything. Cleanable, walkable, maintenance-free. That's where we should live. We want to make sure that we can maintain the space, keep it as clean as possible, maintain the level of the items that are coming into the space so that it's there for years to come. As far as a couple of things that were brought up, the only 2 points that I have are that the heaters should be hangable and not a tripping space. Also, there's a lot of wheelchairs on the street every day as well as strollers. So any heaters, if they could be hung rather than placed on the street, I just think is better for everyone. Also, I would recommend running the heaters into the businesses and making them responsible for them and paying for the electricity. The city shouldn't be paying for electricity that I'm using to heat my space. I have no problem with the heating, coming into that. And then also the gravel that was brought up as well. I know it was argued over a little bit in the last meeting. It's been shown all over the world, the composite gravel. Not only does it drain well, but it creates a great area. It's used in Washington, D.C., Paris, Rome. It's used all over the world. And I know some people were worried about high heels and things. It's not a loose gravel. It's a compacted gravel is my understanding.
Talking about the decomposed granite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it is a hard surface, but it does allow water to permeate through it is my understanding. Thank you very much.
So since you're here representing the restaurant side of things, there was some ideas shown about, clearly umbrellas and heaters, but also some barriers related to wind. And then, of course, there's no suggestion here of winter-long, complete, tenting. That would not be occurring.
Mhm.
So, what are your thoughts about these wind barriers? Or is that something of value, or
I
just
think
something to
anything that would
cripple?
help break up the breeze coming in from the ocean would be good. The only thing with glass I worry about, again, is somebody walking into it. You'd have to make sure that you put some kind of logo or something. I wouldn't want it to be obnoxious in any way, but we can clean it, maintain it. Just something to help break up the breeze, or especially in between the restaurants, would be a good thing. It also makes it very hard for the customers as well as the locals to know, where do I sit to go where?
And they'd be movable, so it could be adjusted, based
I
on the
don't know
need.
if the screens are movable.
Yeah, okay, well, we can come, okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
but
Thank you.
we're open to it for sure,
Okay.
but it is important. Thank you.
Next, please.
Hi, Bob Borthwick. I have to say I'm pretty frustrated tonight because I've followed this project right from the start. I've sent the RFP by a planning firm that wanted me to be on their team. I read the RFP and I saw that there was no real means to see what this space should be. And the only options that were offered to the consultant was a complete and full street closure. And as a consultant that's worked on projects like this all over, I knew that was one example of what could happen, but there were other things that could happen. And I thought, unless other options are given to the community for something this impactful to the downtown, that people would be upset. And so as the workshops were with RRM, they had the first workshop, and people were telling me, like the Browns and others downtown, they were saying, who can listen? Nobody's listening to us. We have needs for this space in terms of parking and visibility and so forth. And I said, that's what the workshops are for. Just show up at the workshop and just state your case. Workshops came, there was absolutely zero opportunity to make those kinds of pleas or requests, zero. And anybody that was at those two workshops knows that. So, here we are. I'm glad Sean's involved here. They're obviously great landscape architects, but there still has not been a resolution about why we're doing this and what the potential negative impacts would be. And not only to the shopping experience and the parking, but even the historical context of what we're doing. I mean, you read the RFP and it says the purpose of this is to enhance the historical character of Laguna Beach. And I think it's arguable whether what we just saw, as beautiful as it is, really enhances the history of the town. I mean, I think that's a discussion that's viable and that we should have. And so to hear that, we're not allowed to bring up alternatives or opinions about what's historical and what isn't, then, what's the planning commission for? That's kind of the way I see it. I mean, I'm telling people in town, just be patient and this will evolve. And if we only can come here tonight and talk about the color of brick rather than why are we doing this, then it's frustrating. And I think that's why that Indy poll was pretty indicative of that. 90% of the people that responded said they don't like the direction of this. And so I'm just trying to represent people that are frustrated. And, I want the best solution to happen. And if it's Sean's solution and everybody agrees that's the best solution, I'm good with that. But I don't think other options have anywhere near been examined. So anyway, thank you. Sorry I took a little too much time.
Thank you.
Hi, Erin Slattery, a longtime resident of South Laguna. Specifically, I'm going to go through the items. So I feel that eucalyptus has been here for 100 years. So for the replacement trees, I would personally like to see the eucalyptus be consistent throughout the promenade. The lounge chairs, I preferred option 2, the softer version. One of the things about all 3 of the chairs, however, I would want them to be stackable so that they could be easily moved for event purposes. Also, the Anderac chair, I know personally, sometimes they're a little low, and as we get older, it's harder to get out of the lower chairs. So I'm actually saying the lounge chairs might be more beneficial to our community than the Anderac chairs in general. Dining chairs option 2, softer, I like those. And Anderac chair, I was going for option 1. Softer was the look I personally liked better. And then for the benches, I liked the 3 beams on option 2. And then I liked option 3 with the armrests. So when you're looking at those images. Heat, option 3 pendants. I agree with the restaurant. I think that's going to be looking really great for that space. The wind barrier, I definitely like the glass or maybe plexiglass, something that's not breakable as it looks like they are removable and so they could be stored easier. Let's see. The other thing I have is the vine covered barrier. I mean, I like the planter boxes currently, so I don't know why we would need to change those out. And then the Bulliard design, I really love the art boxes that we have on the ocean side. I'm just wondering if rather than having just gray steel things, if they could be incorporated into the artwork, especially like the pillars that you have where you had the series of pillars, maybe that could be the Bulliards instead. But that's just ideas, throwing them out there. The main thing that I wanted to address is actually the pavement. My mother had decomposed granite in her driveway, and it got tracked everywhere. So she ended up using the paving stones with the sand inlay so that it's porous, so that it can drain through. But it's still a nice hard surface that's not trackable. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you very much.
And this one too. Along with what Bob has said about options, I would like to urge the Planning Commission, if you're not going to talk about options tonight, your message to the city council is that they should do a complete EIR that has alternatives. And we need to see alternatives drawn up to the same level of detail as the plan that you have here. It's only fair that all the options be presented completely. And I don't see, it seemed to me from the discussion with the council that they were thinking that they had to do only minimal environmental analysis, and I can't imagine why this would not require a complete EIR. So I've handed you out a couple of exhibits. One of them is a 1926 version of a flooded downtown, and we're going to see this again. And the other is the floodplain as it overlays downtown. And I colored in forest that, is in the floodplain. So a 12-inch grate is not going to be effective. And I understand that a flood could happen that would conquer every, up to a couple of feet at least. And that's why we have the floodgates. But the curbs provide a fallback for a medium level flood. Between the curbs, that accommodates a certain flow of water without going into the stores. You get rid of those curbs and raise that street, you're just letting all that water go in, even with a small flood. And this is a huge impact, and this is one of the things that needs to be examined in the EIR, as well as the traffic flow and the parking flow. And so we need to see the alternative, the hybrid alternative. We need to see what could we do with the present, with the layout before COVID that would make this space more usable and more attractive without closing off the street. And do we have options where the flexibility lies in the programming, where we close the street for certain occasions and certain hours of the day and leave it open for the merchants to do their business? All those things should be fairly alternatized and analyzed as alternatives in an EIR, and that is how the community will get to make a decision on this with full information. Right now, we're going full speed ahead with an option that is a single-minded approach, and that's not proper and not in conformance with the Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
And keep the eucalyptus. Add more.
Ann Chrisman. I have some questions, if you could answer these tonight. The tables that are out there, are they for everyone to use, or are there certain ones that are going to be designated for the restaurants? Right now, there are some that are just designated for the restaurants. The heaters that you're talking about putting up, is this throughout the entire promenade, or is it just in front of the restaurants? And who's paying for those heaters and those tables for the restaurants, if it is for them? Who's going to police this? If any of you were out there this weekend, it was a total mess. So now that 5-foot space on the sidewalk is about 4 at the most. The hostess little tables have been pushed out into the sidewalk. There are now high chairs that the restaurants put out. Their extra chairs are sitting out. They have easels with the specials on them. They have tables with, or stands with menus on them. All of this impeding into the sidewalk area. You could not move. Then there's strollers. People are eating, and now their strollers are in the sidewalk. The umbrellas, the heaters now are moved from the tables out into the promenade because they're not using them. And then when they switch and they put the umbrellas, there's bus stations out there stacked full of dishes. It just was a joke. And I've got pictures of all of it if you care to see, if none of you were down there. So who is going to police this is a question I have. Are we to, it's been 4 years and nothing has been done about any of this policing because we call all the time. So if you haven't done it in 4 years, we're supposed to assume that you're suddenly going to be on top of this. And I do have, I was disappointed to hear you say that this was not about whether or not we should have a promenade or not. We have never had this discussion. In fact, it was very disappointing at the last council meeting when we discussed the promenade, and I felt it was just lip service that we spent 2.5 hours here voicing our opinions, giving up our night to come here, and then the council never addressed a single issue that we brought up. It was kind of like, oh, let's just let the people come in, let them talk, and then it was the council and Sean and the planning commission just had their own discussions and nobody addressed anything that we had said. And we have never been able to. What Bob had said about those 2 meetings before, nothing has ever been brought up. I think that you have to ask the people if they want this. This is not something that should just be decided by all of you. We should all have a say-so in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Yurka. I hope you took Bob Borthwick's comments to heart, both in the letter that he wrote that was in the packet and also tonight. We always talk about the expertise of our residents and how impressive it is. And I know he was asked to serve on a committee, and as he explains it and explained tonight, it was just choosing between kind of different colors of brick. And I think that's a missed opportunity and a squandering of the expertise that we claim to value. I want to thank you for your very cogent presentation and all the hard work that, that you've done on this. There was one thing in the presentation that really struck me, which is the idea of the aspiration of something timeless. And I think that's maybe getting to some of the points that we heard about the kind of historic character of the downtown. Forest Avenue is not timeless. It really has the look and feel and the layout that it's had for 100 years. And one of the things that I found disconcerting about the slides that we saw was the kind of washing out of the historic character of the the buildings that were there in order to really showcase what seems to me as kind of beautiful and well thought out as it is, too many bright, shiny objects. I agree that, you know, this idea that kind of savoring the imperfections of Laguna, or what we like to call the kind of eclectic character of it, and you know, just having like kind of a windy path isn't imperfect. This seems very precious to me. And I do feel like it is the wrong feeling for Laguna. I'm just shocked that we are still contemplating serving alcohol throughout this space. I can't think of anything that is going to make it more amenable to tourists than to residents to have that. And I am going to have a cocktail when I get home and a glass of wine. I'm not a teetotaler, but that just seems like a mistake to me for this public space. Just the one detail, because I know I've brought this up to you before, about the Ipe wood As of November 2024, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora designates that tree as endangered. High demand has led to widespread deforestation and illegal harvesting that have gutted the Brazilian rainforest. It is very difficult for reasons I'm not going to go into to grow it sustainably. And it's not a plantation-ready tree. So I urge you just tonight, shut that down, please. Anyway, I really appreciate your attention and look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. What I'm thinking of doing is, I think there's one thing I'd like to address that doesn't have anything to do with the design, because I'm just curious myself. And it has to do with the EIR. But then the other idea would be the questions that Louis has in great detail taken down, rather than go through all of those right now. Louis, as we go through the items, if we could address the questions as we go to each item, and if you could make sure that the questions are addressed as we discuss each item. But before we start, and I'm hoping that we would put up the slides again and go through each of the items, in a methodical manner. But if you could, whether it's Louis or Anthony, can you address the EIR issue? I mean, what is the expectation? Are we planning to do an EIR that would have alternatives, or what's the current strategy on that?
So that's a great question brought up by members of the public, and happy to address that. So as mentioned at the upcoming public hearing that's scheduled for March 19, part of the recommended actions and part of that general report will be the CEQA analysis on the project. And staff has worked in consultation with BBNK and an outside CEQA consultant to generate the findings and analysis for that. So that will be part of the action, but it does not include a full environmental impact report. That is not going to be part of the analysis. But once again, as mentioned, this analysis has been reviewed by BBNK, our city attorney firm, and also an outside CEQA consulting firm that does this for a living. So we've had a lot of analysis on the CEQA component to the project, and that will be presented at that public hearing for more discussion on that.
And then just in terms of process, I know that any input that we give SWA tonight is going to lead to a revised alternative, which will come back to the Planning Commission. And after the Planning Commission takes action, does the final go to the City Council at some point?
So based on the direction tonight, SWA will come back with a revised plan as early as March 19th. That'll be the public hearing. The Planning Commission will approve the design review component and the coastal development permit for the project, also with the CEQA analysis. And then the council will be reviewing another component of the project, which is considered the Slow Streets program. That will be going to the City Council at the same time. But this will be the last review from the Planning Commission at that upcoming meeting for the project. And then from there, the council will review the project once it receives the bid notice, the bid awards, and review the whole bidding documents associated with it, leading on to construction.
So there will be additional public hearings at the City Council that will provide the opportunity for more public input before a final vote is taken.
Yeah, as early as the March meeting, there'll be another hearing at the City Council related to the project, and then the bidding process as well.
Okay, thank you. At this point, let's then go back through it and have our questions from both the commission, the council members that are here, and also Louis, any questions that are relevant from the public tonight. So let's start with trees. So if you could just recap the choices, the alternatives and the choices.
Yeah, regarding trees, there are two choices, both in terms of quantity and species. Okay. The first series of diagrams were about the species. And the one option was really to build upon the strength of Laguna Beach and forest, which is really adding to that forest of eucalyptus, mainly the silver dollar gum, but in a kind of meandering fashion, but keeping those view sheds down the core of the space open.
So we really have three options. One is the plan you presented last time, which is
Yeah.
fewer trees.
Yeah.
Adding more eucalyptus.
That's right.
Or creating a little bit more variety with a couple of large, oak trees.
Exactly.
And so I would open that up to the discussion of our group here.
I think more is better. I prefer the heavy version. My concern about new eucalyptus trees is the size once upon installation. And we don't want to have small trees for a whole host of reasons. Have you done research on availability of
Yes, in fact, we've
specimens?
contacted a larger nursery that specializes in this particular species, silver dollar gum. And we've already talked to them about what's called contract growing. And they currently have 24-inch box, which are quite sizable. I'd say almost as high as a ceiling here in terms of their height at 24s, but we contract grow to 36 to be even larger than that. So we can, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, the latest response that we've had with the nursery is if during the timeline of the end of the year, we're likely to be able to transplant those 24-inch boxes to 48-inch boxes. And that will help the tree grow as in the meantime. So slightly larger.
Larger still.
And I think the variety, adding a couple of heritage trees, is the Virginia, Quercus virginiana is a good idea. But I would like to see those at a big size.
Yeah.
Like
They are expensive, as you know.
they are.
Yeah.
But they are placemakers and they become focal points and meeting points themselves.
I agree.
You're talking about the oaks?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, 96, 120. And the other comment I would make, which hasn't been brought up here, except in your comments about view of the retail frontages, is about the ficus trees, which are not a part of a eucalyptus forest. Yeah, they've been there a while, but if you look carefully at those 4 ficus trees, the 2 on the Glenary, and one of which is growing into the eucalyptus, and I guess there's some question about whether they could be successfully removed from their entwinement with the eucalyptus, but they are actually block the view from downtown, from here and along Forest into not only the promenade, but also even beyond that to the cobble area and the beach. I think they could be lost. I would rather see a really strong palette of eucalyptus, and even if we add a couple of eucalyptus to replace those ficus trees, that would be fine too. Down on the ocean and at Coast Highway, the ficus on, I believe, the north side is a pretty significant tree. One of those 2 is more significant than the other. So I would want to keep that one, which I think is the one in the north, maybe, so there's a little variety, but lose the one on the south. The idea of having entry trees has nothing to do with the forest, and I find it very suburban. And we're trying to do something that really has high impact. It just kind of dilutes the idea. So I like the variety, and I like heavy.
Okay.
And were you weighing in favor of the oaks?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great.
George?
Oh. Trees are not necessarily my expertise at all. I know that there was some conversation when we were steering away a little bit from adding more eucalyptus trees to either oak or a sycamore. I don't know if a sycamore was even in the conversation here. My concern with overdoing it is creating too many roadblocks to the visualization of the retail stores down there. So, I like to see trees are great. I would probably lean a little more towards option 2. And and I don't know if there's a consideration in terms of the choice of tree as to whether or not we could use a couple of sycamores or, to add a little variety, or if there's a mess issue with these, either oak or sycamore tree, if they're super messy in certain times of year that require a lot of extra maintenance versus a eucalyptus tree. I can't answer that because I'm not a tree expert, but I know that there was, at our last workshop, there was some discussion about the potential of a sycamore as well as an alternative species. So I guess you guys can address that, or we'll talk about that at a later date.
No, can you go ahead and comment on that?
Yeah, we thought the oak actually is more in keeping in terms of color and evergreen nature of the tree. Is viable companion to the eucalyptus. Certainly the sycamore, it defines the canyon as we come in at the entrance into the village. It is it's a different texture. It's a larger leaf, and they do get very, very large over time. It has probably a much different look than obviously adjacent to the euc. And it kind of speaks to a slightly different, more riparian, character than say the eucalyptus and the oak do, which is more of a drier, kind of a dryland tree. So that's part of the reason why we kind of steered away from that. It's a bigger leaf texture and so forth. It's more of a character.
Because I want to make sure we celebrate the historic architecture as well. So if we, if we're getting too thick with foliage all over the place, then we're hiding the buildings that are down there too. So
Yeah.
Can you speak to the height of the branching on the eucalyptus that you're talking about? Are they high enough that it would allow clear visibility of the retail and signage?
Absolutely. And if that is an issue, we could do some slight tree pruning, and add installation. And the advantage of the eucalyptus also, I think it's that earlier painting we saw, the plane, of course, that was of eucalyptus, but there's a very relaxed quality to it, the way the leaf kind of hangs down, and it's just a magical kind of a feeling, and really captures the spirit, I think, of Laguna in a positive way. And it's more transparent. It's a little bit, you can't really, you don't know what it's going to do over time, which is part of its charm, right? The trees out there are leaning different directions and doing their own thing, which is kind of part of who we are, right? So, yeah.
Could you go back to the slide of the Madrid Park or dining area? There, okay. There are a lot of trees in this picture. I think this captures a really kind of universal feeling of a comfortable, relaxing place to sit. It also shows pebble paving, right? And these sort of more relaxed, rounder shapes of the furniture, lots of trees, and umbrellas. These umbrellas you didn't show any of this type of umbrella, but these umbrellas are very cool. But I wanted to go back to this as it relates to George's comment about too many trees. I don't think what is shown in your heavy is going to be too many trees.
Yeah, I do agree. I think the advantage of the euc is a very tall, slender tree. You see the trunk, over time it gets a little bit larger, but again, it's not that large. It's very transparent and provides good visibility to the retail.
Yeah, and just a comment about the architecture. There's no intention of changing any facades of any buildings. And the idea is to really celebrate the existing, elevations that we have, the storefront elevation.
And I would say that the landscape in our work has become more and more dominant as a very important strategy for creating destination and for creating comfortable places for people as a gathering space in all of our projects. So I want to point that out.
Yeah, and I don't see how it's flashy in any way. It seems quite subdued.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Mark, comments?
I guess I was obsessing on something else other than the design, but I still am fascinated over our fear of the change. And I was just trying to do some measurements here and thinking, my gosh, I'd never really thought about it, but 80% of that of Forest Avenue was designed to accommodate the automobile. And here we are now, 80% of that street is designed to accommodate vehicles. And here we have a chance to design it in such a way where 100% of it is for humans. And it just was just running through my mind. So I'm just sharing that for what it's worth. As far as some of the design elements.
On trees, we're on trees right now.
Yeah, the trees, sorry. So how many meetings have we had on this?
Many. Yeah.
How many?
15?
Are we counting focus groups, public hearings,
Both.
workshops?
Both.
Yeah. it's
Because we
been-
have heard all as well that there's been limited public outreach and, I've been living with this for quite some time. And so I'm just finding excuses for my wandering mind as we were talking about trees. I like the idea of the oak trees personally, the mixture of the oak. And I did have a question for you, Sean. The two trees at the entry on Glen Eyre there in Forest, there's a couple, I believe they're ficus trees, and they're a bit entangled into some existing. Was the plan to remove those?
Not in the present plan, no. But we're still awaiting a final report from the arborist on the health and condition of those trees, so to be determined.
Okay, 'cause when I look at them, it just looks like there's some kind of a problem.
Mhm.
They're not, they're competing with one another.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we should pay some attention to that. And to George's point, if you look and you pay attention to that corner there, those ficus trees are quite obstructive to as far as the visual when you're going up Forest and the rest of the street. So I think that is something that we should pay attention to as far as thinning that out. And I also agree with George as far as the rest of the street's concerned, that we should be cognizant of the fact that we don't want it to overpower the visual aspect and what George referred to as the architecture. It's important for me as well. And I get what Sue's saying, the picture that we saw because of the wherever that was. Where is that picture at? Madrid, sorry. That's taken from where you're not really seeing the canopy portion of it. So it's hard for me to really see. And the buildings are, so far off into the foreground. It obviously in this particular case doesn't have any impact architecturally, but I just think that we should be cognizant of covering up the architecture.
Yeah, in this case, our buildings are behind us and there's kind of like a 15-foot wide pavement against those buildings. Then we have the decomposed granite you see here. Yeah.
Sue?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion about the trees. I kind of defer to Susan on that. But in terms of the size, we do have people that want to buy trees for the promenade. Some people who are willing to donate money and buy trees. So I think we should be able to get some pretty good sized trees based on the number of people that want to donate.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
I'll make my comments. I prefer I think having eucalyptus, a domination of eucalyptus, I think would be a very dramatic, bold statement and be pure in terms of the theme of the street. And I think it would be a higher level of design. I do like the oak trees because I think they anchor the street because of their girth and their size, and they will become an attraction. And the Adirondacks, underneath the oak trees is going to be a really cool moment. I'm excited about, because I don't remember us talking about the idea of getting rid of the ficus trees. And I'm concerned about the views coming into the retail, because I think we've heard there's a concern about the retail. And I think we really have to, do what we can to reinforce it. And I think we're all on the same page there. Opening up views from PCH, I think is, really important. And so I think seriously considering getting rid of the ficus and going and extending the eucalyptus out, I think clarifies the concept. And so I would be in favor of that. My tendency is for the heavier, the more trees rather than the medium trees. I think that's kind of the two alternatives where we're focusing. So if I were to summarize where I think we kind of are is, I think we're for the oaks. I'm going to just say this. I think we're for at least getting rid of 3 of the ficus. I think, and I think the only thing that we're really maybe divided on is, are we on the heavier planting or the medium planting in terms of the number of trees? Do we want to?
I'm fine with number 3 if that's the consensus. You know, a couple more trees isn't going to make or break.
And I would submit that if we go with the heavier planting, which I think, you know, I think is more dramatic and kind of exciting, and it more reinforces the big idea here of the forest, we would do so though with the kind of condition that we really work on the visibility, you know, and the height.
Absolutely,
And view corridors to the retail and to the signage. And if we can't do that, then I think we'd have to reconsider.
Right. I want to point out that option 3, what's called heavy here, really essentially is having the same amount of trees on the south side as you have on the north. They're just meandering versus just in a straight line.
So what we're really talking about here is a hybrid, right? It's really the heavy with the oak trees.
Yeah, absolutely. We can
Okay.
make that happen.
Can I get a nod from our group on those findings? Beautiful. Okay, let's talk about ABC issues. Do we want to open the public hearing back up, or no? I think
I think we already got
well, did you have a question that we didn't address? On the trees? I'll tell you what we'll do. Let us go through this, and then we'll open up the public hearing at the end, potentially for any additional questions. Okay, ABC. Can you show us the slides on that? And I mean, the fundamental question here is the whole space being ABC. And let me ask a detailed question. I know you've met with ABC since our last meeting, and there was a question of whether or not, you know, mixed drinks, distilled spirits, I think is the term, would or would not be allowed in the space, or would it just be beer and wine? What's the current thinking on that?
So since our last meeting, we met with ABC last week and they provided us further guidance on that. And based on the latest guidance from them, as long as we have signage on each end of the street and also during the hallway when people are exiting, if the signage is there, no alcohol behind this point, and each end of the street has barriers, including into the hallway leading out to each exit area, the use of alcohol, beer, wine, spirits, also known as hard alcohol, that can be allowable within the space of the promenade.
So the two choices here are what you just described, the whole space being open to all spirits, or spirits being limited to the restaurant areas. So if we could just confirm the direction we're going.
I can
Comments?
talk about that if you want. So the ABC came down and we walked the site, and we had SWA there as well. So we walked the site with them. And what they said is, as long as you have bollards on either end, and we're going to have to embed some of the bollards in the landscaping, because it needs to go all the way across. So not just the street, but it needs to, you know, extend out. So that'll be part of the landscaping. And then, as we mentioned earlier, you have to have signage that when you leave the promenade, they say no alcohol by on this point, all the places that you could come in, the breezeway and the other end. The other thing they said is because we're going to activate that space with music and things like that. When we have an event down there, the restaurants cannot use their license to give any alcohol in the promenade. Only in the restaurant itself, or their current enclosed patios, but not on the promenade. It's just for the duration of the event.
But if the patios are not enclosed, but in this case, the patios aren't enclosed. The point is that restaurants can only serve alcohol to customers sitting in their seats, either indoors or outdoors. But you can't go buy a martini and go sit across the street and have a martini underneath the oak tree. And is there any, does the signage doesn't say anything about people bringing alcohol into the space?
They didn't say that we need to do that. What they just said is as you depart the area, you need to have signage. They didn't say anything about not bringing it in. I mean, it could be that we need to do that, but they didn't say anything about that.
If I may, one of the comments is that each restaurant needs to have branded glassware in order
Yeah.
to identify alcohol and where it came from.
Is there going to be any requirement beyond, the bollards are sort of a semi-invisible barrier, but is there going to be any kind of chain loops in between each of the bollards at
No.
all?
No,
That's
they
not
have
a
to be 5 feet apart.
but there's no requirement to do that.
There's also no requirement to delineate the seating areas.
Okay.
So if I went down to the package store and bought a 6-pack of beer, I could come into the promenade
No.
and drink it?
You can't bring any alcohol in.
Okay, so that would require rethinking of the signage.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Other thoughts on the planning commission?
I was a bit surprised when we did do I wasn't actually at that last meeting, but when I had heard the results of the tour with the ABC, I was adamant about not having the barriers like we have now, I call them bullpens. And I was very insistent on just wanting it open. And I thought that they were going to place some limits on it. And I was willing to live with those limits in order to get the openness of the whole promenade. But then when, after they reported back to me and said that the ABC was okay with it and that our existing bollards on the front that were going to be used for safety anyway from vehicular traffic from busting through there, I was quite surprised. And so it just, I wasn't concerned with the alcohol.
Well, it
after
sounds
that.
like the alcohol outside of the restaurant seating is going to be very limited because you can't bring it in. And if you buy it at a restaurant, you can't take it outside the seating. So the real opportunity of the more universal ABC access would be special events, where there might be, a larger.
Yeah, like let's say somebody wants to come down and have a musical event there. They can get a 1-day license from the ABC. They could serve beer and wine there, but the restaurants can't serve. Unless you're inside the restaurant or in enclosed patio the way it is, and they're existing enclosed patios, not on the promenade.
So the question in my mind is, so somebody comes down, they have dinner at the restaurant, one of the restaurants. They're, order a couple of drinks and then, they're done with dinner, but they're not done with their drink and they inadvertently stand up and walk across the plaza to sit and just hang out. I mean, how is that going to be,
Was it
controlled?
policed? Yeah.
That the restaurant owners are responsible for that. They're responsible for their ABC license.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Remember, it would be their branded, I'll call it glassware. It's probably not going to be glass, but so it would have to be identified. Each restaurant would have their own.
Their own color of Solo cup.
Yeah.
The question did come up about management, an ongoing sort of oversight. Do we have plans for there being, security isn't the right word, but or maybe it is, that would, weekends and evenings?
We had 14 calls in all of last year to the promenade. 14. So it's not like the current situation now. We're not getting a lot of police calls down there. So we'll have to talk to the police department about walking through there and how they
Okay.
want to do that.
But I believe that you're referring to Ann's comments regarding the policing of just how it's managed.
Yeah,
with the-
signage and trash
Yeah,
and
and
shared
when she
bags.
was talking about that, the hair stood up in the back of my neck because I'm extremely frustrated by this. And I intend to talk to the city manager tomorrow. It's been an ongoing complaint of mine. And, just how this is being taken advantage of with the restaurateurs right now. And I'm just going to talk to the city manager about it. And if worse comes to worse, I'm going to suggest that we halt service on some of the spaces.
And I think I would just point out that, and you didn't say this, but it's evident in the plan if you study it, is the big idea of the plan is to create a much wider walkway in front of the retail. I mean, that's the biggest idea. It's not having a promenade down the middle like we have now. This is a very different concept. This is actually, is actually kind of creates a little bit of a labyrinth walking down the middle. The real circulation now is along the storefronts and along the retail and the restaurants. And now it's double the width. So even if there is a little bit of that happens, we've opened it up, dramatically to create more space and less blockage.
So just to follow up on my comment about how it's being managed right now. So at the next meeting, I promise that the city manager, we're going to talk to the city manager and we will bring the actual plan on how it's going to be managed to the next meeting.
Beautiful. Okay, let's move on to seating. Talk about seating. Pull it up. Come on, Louis, you got to be ready. Okay, so the question here is increasing the amount of seating and also creating more variety in seating.
That's correct.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think more seating is better. Variety is good. The more rounded and less sharp angled and edged is good. I agree with the comment about Ipe wood. Just have to find an alternative.
Yeah, there are tropical alternatives.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, more renewable.
There's also thermally modified sustainable wood that we can specify too, that a lot of these furniture companies use rather than Ipe.
Yeah. Okay. So we can expunge that from the choices. I think the variety, are you going to go through each one?
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
But just as a question, if you go back down at the ocean, at the Coast Highway end, where we have the arc of the orange squares, what is that rectangle? The gray rectangle?
The gray rectangle is a stage setting. So that's, again, a movable stage we construct, and.
Is it raised? It's
Yeah,
raised
yes,
and movable.
It is raised and movable.
Okay.
There's one at
It's
each
whatever
end.
you want it to be.
Yeah. Okay.
One on the right is hidden by the trees, it looks like. It's kind of peeking itself.
All right. Thank you. The Adirondack chairs, those aren't real Adirondack chairs. That's today's version of an Adirondack chair. The real Adirondack chair is impossible to get in and out of.
We go to the Adirondacks.
If we go to the Adirondacks, the one on the left, although it's sharp angled, is easier to get out of than the one on the right.
That's right. You can see it sits higher, the seat itself. So
Yes.
I think it's a better design.
Yeah. So I agree with the comment, whoever commented on, I think maybe it was Aaron, that given our demographic here locally, well, this might be a better choice. So I don't know if there are other manufacturers that maybe have a more rounded option, but this one would be fine.
Yeah. I kind of, the squareness of it appeals to me because it kind of matches some of the suggestions for the benching that we.
Yeah, no, it's
I
good.
Go finish.
Yeah, no, it's good.
I just, before George goes, I just have a question. I get the sense that we're picking one Adirondack, one, not the soft seating, but whatever, the studio seating, and one dining. And I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be more interesting if we didn't pick one, that if the different restaurants actually had different tables and the seating areas had a little variety in the chairs, and there were the old Adirondacks and there are the new Adirondacks, and that kind of eclecticism is, I would submit, is a little bit more in keeping with the community than just having one kind of like Irvine Company. This is what we're going to do. It's beige and it goes from here all the way to the end.
Another option would be incorporating, like say we use the one on the left, just more, one could be natural wood like you see here. Another one could be yellow or pale blue, or, it could be.
And we haven't talked about
incorporate
color. You didn't
Yeah.
talk about color much,
Yeah.
but we should talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, to respond to that idea, I think that there will be enough variety in the seating types, the lounge chairs, the benches, the dining tables, and you had a couple of other options. And as Sean is suggesting, maybe changing the color of some of these, even some of the lounge chairs, that should provide variety. I don't want it to look like, you went to the consignment store and you've got a mishmash of this and that. I feel like that is going to be a little
Too much?
too much.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of seating. I think they've done a good job of showing variety of seating types and, you can come back with an idea about color later.
George?
Okay, I'm looking at the two plan views. I like the basic arrangement of the what I'm going to call the north side of the restaurant side in terms of the number of tables and chairs there. When I go down to option 2, I would sort of split off the restaurant side of option 1 and then add the south side of option 2. I think option 2 with the additional restaurant seating, especially the stuff that's on what I would consider the new 15-foot sidewalk, those cafe tables or whatever. We're starting to get too much, I think. So, if you were to maintain the north side restaurant seating and then add in the additional south side seating, that's sort of where I'm at with it. I think we're getting too much in option 2 in terms of the additional restaurant seating, especially the stuff that's up against, what is on some of these, their enclosed patio spaces that some of the restaurants have. I think we've got plenty of seating for the restaurants, so I would eliminate the additional tables and chairs in option 2, but add in the blue and I guess it's the blue extra tables and chairs there. If we can go to the next
I
slide.
didn't realize there were more restaurant seating.
As far as these examples, I know that we talked when I met with you about a chair that's got a pointed leg on it, especially in the potential DG or P gravel, whatever ends up there, that those are going to poke through, and you were saying I don't see an option for that sort of loop that would connect the legs of the chairs so that they would displace the downward pressure and not dig into any kind of a soft surface. So as far as what I'm seeing here, I'm really not in favor of any of them, because I think there's going to be a problem with them digging into the.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I think we can find a similar design with that.
Yeah, I mean, I like the metal and wood concept. I just think that none of these are appropriate for the type of surfaces outside the brick. In other words, and I think some of it will fall in the more permeable surfaces. So.
Is this one of those things where if you order enough of them, you can kind of have it modified?
Oh, absolutely. We can talk to the manufacturer and they could probably do a custom design for us on any of these features. Yeah.
And as far as the Adirondack, I like the left version.
What about on these chairs, the more rectilinear versus the organic?
Oh, on these, I kind of like these. These are a little cleaner to me if they had the continuous leg underneath, so they didn't push into the DG or whatever's going to end up there. They're just, I don't know, they're simple, clean, unassuming, kind of like that.
I think the second option looks more comfortable.
These,
Yeah.
I'm not going to fall on my sword on this.
I love the arms are, just make things more comfortable.
Yeah, as long as that can be done with a
a
continuous leg. So, yeah, that's fine. Those are my comments.
Mark, thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with not this one, but the option 2. They seem a little bit more sturdy too. It looks like they're cast, maybe. I don't know.
Cast aluminum.
Yeah. So they just seem a little bit more sturdy. It's funny, George, when I see number 1 here, I picture our friend John Zigwitz rocking back in the chair and legs breaking off.
Yes, it would happen.
We always have to remind him to stop rocking in his chair, so those just seem a little bit like, on this option one, on this image that we're on now, if the manufacturers can custom make the chairs, can they make the same design and just see if we could go up a little bit higher?
Yeah, we can ask them that.
Sue?
No, I agree with Susan on the tables and the Adirondack. How many Adirondack chairs are we going to have? I don't want to have a lot of Adirondack chairs.
Quite a few. Look,
I don't like that really.
You haven't suggested rocking chairs.
How about Barca loungers?
Rocking chairs are very popular right now. And if we were to switch out a couple of the Adirondacks for rockers.
You could try. Again, this is a flexible space and it's not a big loss if they don't work.
Is there any concern with
know.
kids getting their feet underneath it and somebody rocking on them? And, I would be a little hesitant to have something that may cause pain to somebody.
Let's look into that, see if there's an issue. Okay.
Oh yeah, all the resorts have them now. They're people go to the rockers first.
That's correct.
Used to be Adirondacks, now they're the rockers.
Can I ask a question? So George, can you restate what you're on the blue tables? Are you suggesting that there are no table on chairs on that side?
No, I like option 2 with the blue, the blue tables. and
It's
chairs.
option 2 on the south side and option 1 on the north side. That's what he's
Yeah.
saying.
I think there's, as far
Okay.
as the green chairs in option 2, I think there's just too much.
Well, it looks, there's more seating on the north side in option 2 for the restaurants, right? How much more?
Looks like quite a bit. That kind of snuck by me. I didn't notice that. And I think that especially the tables that are in the sidewalk, I think are problematic.
I like the tables in the sidewalk, but I could see combining the tables in there are only 10 seats, 2, 4, 6, no, there are 10 tables. I could see combining the tables along the restaurants with option 1, which has less seating for the restaurants. So as not to.
Yeah, I mean, the tables in the sidewalk, one of our big ideas here is to really facilitate walking, along the storefronts.
Right.
And that would force people out to the other side of the trees.
Well, they're also right up against their cordoned off patio spaces, which, all of a sudden you've got people sitting on the patio, and then outside the little designated patio, you've got, these cafe tables. It just seems like it's, you're kind of piling on there a little bit too much.
Yeah, it gives some variety to that edge, it's engaging. I don't think it's a huge imposition. And people aren't coming up to the storefronts to look in the restaurants. People will meander to the storefront around the tables.
It's a flexible system.
It's a very flexible, it's very typical of big cities everywhere.
Yeah, and it might be up to the restaurateurs themselves whether or not they want to add those additional.
That's true.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we like the additional seating on the south. We want to maintain the same number of tables on the north, with the exception of an option of tables up against the building. That could be at the discretion of the restaurant tours. And since it's flexible, that could be adjusted as time goes by. We're liking the more organic, what appear to be more comfortable seating, and the Adirondacks that are higher up. We didn't talk about the benching. Can we go to the benching real quick?
Just one comment on the seating, the dining seating. On the north side, could you go back? Yeah, on the option 2, the north side has two blue clusters down at the Coast Highway end. How do we feel about those? I think they're good.
I think they're good. To me, one other thing I want to say, in my opinion, is I think we should err on the side of comfort. versus, really clean, striking, contemporary design. I know we love that sometimes. But the benches, and I was using, when we were talking, I was using the benches on Main Beach, are very traditional. They're not real super cool and contemporary. We just went through a whole process of rethinking those, and we stuck with them. And one of the reasons was they're really comfortable. You can sit there for hours. And so I would just put a footnote on this, that as we go through the fine tuning, that we move towards comfort and ergonomics versus, contemporary style. And speaking of which, the benches, none of them look comfortable. I think you had one. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. None of them look comfortable to
You
me.
could bring a cushion with you when you go down there.
Now this one, no, go back. I think the one, if you could go back to the benches. Yeah, I think the one on the left is the only one that really starts to look comfortable to me.
I'd rather see the historic bench from the beach.
I was thinking that myself, the historic bench, but what if we did a twist on it? There's one right out here, right? Is that the one you're talking about?
No, I'm talking
Oh.
about the
Curvilinear.
Curvilinear.
Yeah,
I was
we've
talking
just
about this one.
we've replaced.
But if you replace the wood with a natural wood, and if that, instead of concrete, if it was cast aluminum, the sides, it just would be kind of an interesting, you know what I'm talking about, Sean? The benches out here?
Yeah.
You're talking about the Main Beach benches?
Those, right there.
No, that's a different bench than the main
I know.
beach. Yeah.
Oh,
I just think it would be interesting to make a play on that. We have those scattered around town.
Anthony, can we bring up
I can't think of what they
pictures
are.
of those two benches?
I'm going to be an outlier here and tell you I like just the simple block with the bolts in it. That appeals to me. I don't,
it does remind me of kind of like Crystal Cove, found wood on the beach and you remake benches.
I just like the organic nature of it and the fact that it's just a big block of weathered wood. It's just, that's got an appeal to me.
I can't disagree with that. I think it's very striking and very bold. I'm just not sure we have to, again, pick one bench everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have some of this, which I think is really cool, kind of where they have them at the entry, but then elsewhere have some benching that maybe is a little bit more ergonomic and with a back.
Yeah, you have the one at the top, block bench at the Riverwalk.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's great. It's comfortable.
So I'm confused as to what bench Mark is suggesting.
We could all take a field trip outside.
Yeah. Is it ridge? Is it? Is it comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a bus stop. It's reasonable. It's from the era of the town, that's why.
Okay, so this is it. Is this it here?
This is missing.
One of them.
It's got a missing tooth.
Yeah, but you can see how they contoured the seat. Can you
Yeah.
see it?
Yeah, it's got some contour.
I just don't like the cast concrete on this. It's clunky.
Yeah, so Mark was suggesting it not be concrete, I think.
Oh,
But what about, can we find the main beach bench? We spent so much time on that.
Oh, the main beach bench.
This one out here.
Has to be anchored into a footing, stay where it is. The workbench, concrete support can be moved, from one to.
Okay, good point.
Anyway, I guess we could look at options of.
Yeah.
Well, it
Options.
sounds like we have a direction.
Yeah.
And the direction is we like a couple of different bench designs. We like the big timber look because it's very striking and it could be signature to the space, but we would also like to move towards a more ergonomic bench solution.
You can have both.
And I think the point of something that's movable, if the whole theme is flexibility, that would make sense that it could be movable. Do we have a consensus on that direction?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
excellent. Pavement.
Yeah, in fact, what you're looking at here on Main Beach, you're right, those are anchored, but we can have legs that,
Yeah,
four legs basically,
right.
to make it movable. Okay.
Okay, so the first question is pea gravel or DG, right? DG, I think there's a tracking issue, but you're not going to have kids picking rocks up and throwing it, and there's less movement. The gravel's a little bit more unique, but it's a little bit less stable.
Correct. Yeah, the DG is what we heard earlier, that it's material is used around the world successfully in all of our major cities that we spend a lot of money to go to for our vacations. And we love these places, right? So yes, it requires more maintenance. There'll be some sweeping in the summertime, particularly in the morning, which is, I think, what the space deserves. And the decomposed granite speaks, I think, to the organic quality of the community in quite a strong way.
Well, it also picks the beach up and brings it in.
Yeah, it's also a porous material, so it's sustainable. It allows for more drainage and in the space as well.
Thoughts?
I talked to you about this when we met in terms of, on a rainy day or several rainy days, as far as the decomposed granite, people walking through it and, potentially tracking it onto the brick and, what are your thoughts on that? Because
It actually holds up pretty well. I have it in my backyard. We see on the right-hand side here, it's very compact, it's very hard, and I've walked on it in the rain and it's quite clean. We can also incorporate, a perforated drain system beneath to increase its, ability to whisk the water away on a rainy day.
I don't know if there's been any, I did go down to the River Street walk world. And that's pea gravel down there, right?
That's right. It's actually a pretty stable, it's a stabilized pea gravel in a dining area. It has a black geogrid beneath it that's invisible beneath the surface pebbles, but it's holding up quite well, actually.
There is a difference though, George. We were talking about earlier and I never did get clarity. Were you looking at the system in front of the restaurants or out more alongside the parking lot? When you were at Riverwalk?
Oh, I was there on a Sunday, so it was super crowded and I was trying to avoid all the crowd. But I was just looking at the parking lot.
Okay, so that's a different.
Yeah, the parking lot's struggling a little bit, and I think, and it's obvious, it's because the tire wheels turning and so forth.
Yeah, it's holding up really well in the pedestrian area inside the space. If you get a chance to go back, but still, I think decomposed granite is a traditional material that is, proven, and I would kind of lean myself towards that.
I mean, if I was going to make the choice between what you're showing here, it would be the decomposed granite.
Yeah.
Susan?
I could go either way, but there's definitely a maintenance component of the DG as well.
Absolutely.
And the high heel stuff, I'm so sick of hearing about the high heels problem. It's just not, it's not a problem if the pea gravel is installed with a proper system and it's the right size pea gravel and it's compacted, the base is compacted correctly. There isn't any problem walking on it. I can go either way. I actually like the granularity of the pea gravel, gives another texture to the space, but I can easily make the jump using the DG, the relationship to the ocean, to the beach, and so forth. I mean, I don't know that we want to do two different materials. I don't think we do.
No, but I would say that there's also, we're going to do mock-ups, build a small area of each material and including the brick. So that has to be signed off before we, apply that to the space.
Yeah, I would say if we go with the DG, we should probably have walk-off grates at all of the store entries.
That's a good point.
Mark?
I'm split on it as well. I mean, I think I lean more toward the pea gravel though.
Sue?
I don't have a preference.
I think the mock-ups will say a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So defer to the mock-ups?
Yeah, and also I would encourage you to go out to River Street and take another second look at where the dining chairs
Right.
are on the pea gravel.
You know, one thing that Mark Christie said, so the Riverwalk, they have that kind of matrix, that metal matrix, whatever, it's to keep the gravel in place.
Plastic matrix, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really working all that well, he said. And they were concerned because, you know, he's got a store down there that people were getting it on their shoes and tracking it in, scratching the floors.
And his store is right out next to the parking lot, and I'm not sure if it's folks coming in off the
Yeah.
parking lot or so.
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Also, you know, after that first year, you want to come back with a second thin layer to refresh the material. I did the same with the decomposed granite in my home, for example. Then it starts to really, you know, live in quite nicely.
Well, as a base case, what's our preference? And the consultant is, their preference is the DG. We have an,
I guess mine is, I mean, I had it in my yard up in Bluebird. I didn't notice me tracking it in the house.
I think the DG is a little bit more practical.
Yeah.
And I also like the idea of it picking up the spirit of the beach and bringing it in. It's more time tested. So, I love the gravel. I think it's more distinctive and unique. And that's why I like it. And I'm torn too. But I think as a base case, I would go with the DG.
Is that a more grand? I mean, I know that comes in different, you know, either from super fine to
correct,
probably half inch or something. So what is being represented in this image?
It's in the middle where you have just enough clay so it compacts well and it gets hard over time, but also kind of a granular component to it
It's
as
like
well.
1/4 inch or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, 1/8 of an inch. Yeah.
George, aren't you talking about the pea gravel?
No, I'm talking about the.
You're talking about decomposed?
Yeah, because it comes in different.
Also different colors.
Meshes, I guess.
This image, is this a finer version of the decomposed?
Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Somewhere in the middle, but yeah, more on the finer side.
Yeah, it can look sterile.
Mm-hmm.
That's another comment. That's
Yeah.
why seeing a good mock-up 20 by 20, you know, not just a little patch.
But I think
good
it's
mock-up, size
so
mock-up.
affordable that we can refresh it once every couple of years with a new layer to refresh the color. So it has this beautiful, you know, that golden quality to it. There's another space that I really love a lot. It's an historic courtyard in Santa Barbara, the oldest home that Richard Henry Dana talks about in his book, where he went to a wedding in 1825 and it's still there today. I went to a wedding there a few months ago and it was remarkable in the evening. It was magical and it was a DG courtyard, you know, been there for 200 years.
George, what was your preference?
You know, I'm a big texture guy too, but I think the practicality of the decomposed granite is going to be, because I think with pea gravel, you know, I know that, you know, I have some shoes that, you know, gravel gets stuck in all the time. And, you know, I'm walking around my place and you can hear it clanking on the floor. So I have to dig it out every once in a while. So I think as much as I like texture, you know, and I don't think round pea gravel would be appropriate because it's never gonna lock in there. So I think just from a practicality standpoint, the decomposed granite is what I would suggest, anyways. But I wouldn't do the super fine stuff either. If it's got some level of texture, would be good.
Do we want to defer to the mock-up or make a decision?
I think defer.
Okay. Next. Let's go to the paving. Okay, we have 2 herringbone patterns. Thoughts?
We're assuming we have the Crazy Quilt book ending and then in Bouchard's
Yeah,
alleyway.
That's correct.
right?
And we would rebuild the Crazy Quilt so it's ADA accessible, that it is safe, you know, with a harder brick and a harder mortar that's, you know, up to recent specification standards and smooth. and
All right.
level.
So I like option 2. Is this based on a specific brick that you can spec? Or is this just kind of a mood piece?
It's a specific brick that we can find and spec,
Okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh. And the color has a nice relationship to sand.
Yes,
The
it
sand
does.
on the beach. Which I
Also, the
think
idea of
is-
decomposed granite, there's a tie in there, I think. that you've
Right.
seen.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, the brick is irregular. It's not like an endicott that's a machined brick.
That's what, when we do the mortar joint, it's an art. And so the mock-ups are important because the contractor is kind of doing his thing and, we make adjustments at that time. But that kind of smeared look it's a very organic quality, gives it a
Right.
nice, yeah.
Yeah, the one on the left are machined bricks.
Yeah,
Unit
that's what we have
pavers.
today out there, what you see in
Right.
around town.
Which I don't think is very relaxing.
You don't feel comfortable
I don't.
hanging out with that brick? No, I get the option 2 as well. My question is in terms of the grout, can that be colored? So it's not just, our typical gray. I mean, I know it can, but I'm just asking the question,
Could be, but I would, I think a more traditional gray color here is more timeless because that's what you expect to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know the crazy quilt is the crazy quilt and all of these things, by the way, because, when you look at some of the crazy quilt up further towards City Hall I know there's some broken areas, some undulation areas, some trip hazards and things like that. So as you explained to me before, that there'll be a foundation to this. In other words, a slab or something that would be below these things so that once they're in place and leveled out, they're not going to, the likelihood of them moving or.
That's actually a must,
Yeah.
sub-slab, because we want to avoid any trip hazards. We want
Right.
this surface to be as level as possible and
Right.
flush with the tree rates, et cetera, right?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Are we, is the city going to come into an agreement with the property owners to pave up to the front door?
Yeah.
Except
We've been talking about that.
Yeah, okay.
So, George, did you have a preference?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards option 2. I think the other is, although it's, traditionally been used in crosswalks and other places in town, I think, to have this be a little more special and a little more organic, I think I think it just reads better.
Mark?
How close do you think, Sean, that this is to the real thing?
You mean the image?
Yeah.
The image does it really look like that?
That's real brick, yeah.
That's what I was asking. Is this actual specific brick that they can spec?
I
Yes.
think similar to the DG gravel option is we would go down and have full-scale mock-ups that show color, kind of a grouting approach. Maybe one's more heavy, one's lighter, and just figure out what looks better in the space.
Mhm.
You can also see in option 2, the brick is slightly longer, is a little bit in proportion than option 1.
So like 10
we'll
inches
just-
long versus 7.5, I think.
I'm
It
sorry.
also looks like the grout is tinted in the option 2. But anyway, I'm trying to get my arms around the deviating from what we have in the rest of downtown. And then also, how is this going to tie into the crazy quilt?
One idea in the mock-ups is we could explore option 1 with the same grouting technique you see in option 2. So, the brick we have today, a slightly different approach to the mortar joint.
Okay, then I'll wait, reserve my final decision until we see the mock-ups.
Can
Okay.
we pave the intersection? We now have the Glen Harry crosswalks delineated in brick, which is part of the project. Is that correct or not?
Yes.
The triangle, the residual triangle, can that become brick? Infill it with brick?
Absolutely. That's
Where
good.
are you talking about, Susan?
On the far right
On
of
the
the
far
plan.
right.
Or the two crosswalks.
Instead of it just being crosswalks, it would be that whole area would be brick.
I want to point out that the pattern might be, we have to look into that more because it's vehicular brick. You know, as you know, it's a different cross section. And sometimes, I'm not sure if the herringbone pattern would be, works in from a vehicular standpoint. Right now it's a running bond for a reason. But yeah, we'll do further research on that exact pattern, but the same brick, we would want to carry that out.
Okay, I think we have our direction on that. Defer, which is fine. We're doing a herringbone brick pattern.
Yes.
We're deferring the specifics to the mock-ups.
Correct.
The moments of discovery. Can we talk about those?
Yeah. I think we were talking about, sort of the Walk of Fame vibe or whatever, but I had this other idea that may or may not fly with everybody else, but thinking in terms of beyond like recognizing, whether it's a historic figure, somebody who had a large impact on the community in the past, or whether distant or not too distant past, or even going forward. But I also was thinking of a way of maybe offsetting some costs for the promenade through having a legacy program for anybody in town, any resident in town who would like to, buy a brick or a paver or whatever it would be with their family name on it to have inset in the, in or around or some location in the promenade, to be determined what would be what charge would be for that. But, it could be a way of raising, $250,000 or something to potentially, offset some of the costs and also give people a sense of connection to it by, having a sort of a family legacy concept there. It's just a thought, but, I think that, other institutions and places do things like that. And it's a way of creating ownership for one thing, and also a way of deferring some of the costs to the city itself. So I'm just going to throw that into the mix, and you guys can decide if it's viable or worth even thinking about.
Actually, there is such a place already in Laguna Beach, which is the alley right next door, just to the north. And it's kind of been forgotten about, and it's no longer an active program, but there are probably, a couple of hundred name bricks in there. Yeah. It's probably 35 years old because I bought bricks in there. And then that was it. It was kind of a one-time only, and that program stopped. And people love it. But anyway, I do think.
It's over next to Toes in the Nose, that little.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's not very clean.
No, it's not a nice
So it
place.
doesn't look good at all.
No, but its day will come. Yeah.
I'm not saying, to put more frosting on the cake here, but it was just a thought that I wanted to run by everybody.
So in your mind, would there be one area that would have that, or would they be scattered all over? Or?
To be determined. I haven't even gotten that far, and I wanted to see if it was even a viable thing to even discuss. So I thought this would be a good time to bring it up.
Yeah, I think getting people to buy in is a great idea. It could be other things too.
Could be.
It could be benches, it could be trees, it could be, with plaques, I guess.
I think I was just thinking of a way of offsetting some of the cost.
Yeah.
One thing that comes up all the time, not all the time, but it comes up, a fair amount, is that people want to, when someone in their family passes away, they're always looking for some place to memorialize there. And we don't have very many places anymore. Like all of our benches are pretty much taken. I think when Nell Hathaway passed away, we got, Marlo did something, and it's over by it's over in the south end of Heisler. But I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to bog down the conversation.
Oh, no,
so I'm just-
I think you're, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I would be supportive of it.
I like the Walk of Fame or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure it should be just artists, though. I think it should be, I'm not sure there's that many founding artists. So I think it should be, yeah, like you say, Laguna artists and city founders.
Mhm.
And I like the idea of it telling a little story that explains who they were and what they
Exactly.
contributed. I mean, I was talking about this with Sean and, you know, I think there's, you know, simplicity is good because it creates that flexibility. And I think we've all bought into that, but you have to be careful because it can also be boring. And I think if we can infuse some moments in here that are engaging kind of intellectually to people and educational, I think it elevates the experience. There's a reason to walk from one into the other because you want to look at these different and see who they are, and it extends the duration of the visit and so forth. So I'm glad we have support for this.
I mean, if you go,
We talked about it at the last meeting too.
Yeah, as an idea.
As an idea, right? But then you've added on the idea of
Let's
the
go
ribbon.
Let's go to the ribbon and talk about that. And that was.
Can I ask one question before we leave this? How big are those plaques, Sean, roughly?
Well,
There's some bricks.
yeah,
right
12
there.
by 18. Yeah, I mean, they're relatively small. I mean, the diagram is just a diagram. Those are showing a little larger, but in actuality, they don't have to be too overpowering, but something you just discover.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to the lower floor of the museum, you know, when that was poured, there's imprinted names in there of some of the original founding members of the museum. It's pretty, and it was sort of unnoticeable for a long time. And now when they cleaned up the lower floor of the museum, you can really see them now. And it's definitely part of our history for sure. So, you know.
Some of those are donors too. Some of them are, some of them aren't.
Right.
Okay, let's go to the next.
So the diagram here is just that. It's not like literally where we'd have a feature such as this. It could be in any number of design motifs that can be studied. But the idea, again, of using the same material of bronze that is set into the brick or paving, an abstraction of the kelp, and you know, which actually is interesting. It's the same kind of a leaf pattern as the silver dollar gum that you see at Forest right now, with some connection there.
But the big idea is ocean to the hills.
That's right, ocean to the hills.
So it could trigger a discussion.
Yeah.
The thought, and there could be even a little interpretive moment that explains what it is.
And why it's important is I think there's a link that's overlooked from the ocean to the hills, right? It's becoming more apparent as our coastlines are changing.
I have a couple of thoughts on, you know, are we overstating the obvious? You know what I mean? We've got the hills and we've got the beach and we have the ocean. You know, do we need to keep telling people that we have those things here by, you know, inlaying it into, you know, where I don't know where this would go exactly. My only other slight hesitation is that depending on how big these bronze inlays are, when they're wet, they can be really slippery.
Yeah, that's correct.
I agree with you.
Whatever your name is.
Yeah, no, I wasn't thinking that. I was just trying to think about, I think also we're starting to pile on with stuff, you know? It's getting a little crowded over here in here. I think the historic, the founding fathers and the artists and whatever else we want to throw on these plaques is enough. This, you know, there's some really beautiful examples of these up in Keisler, you know, all of this up in Keisler.
Right.
I feel it's more appropriate maybe up there because this is the historic center of town. And so I think concentrating on the history right here is That's going to be fascinating. Rather than trying to do too much.
Thoughts?
I agree with Sue.
Okay, let's move on. Restaurant seasonal protection. Sue, did you have a contrary opinion? Okay.
I'm obviously, the umbrellas, I don't have a particular, aesthetic on whether they're white or colored or a mix of both. Uh, let's keep going through the slides. Heaters. I don't think you should even consider the ones that are freestanding at all because they occupy space and they're kind of clunky and they have to be weighted and there's all kinds of things. So if we're going to place heaters, I would not go for the freestanding option. And I think the pendants are a little more interesting. And was there something
Do
else?
the pendants, do they blow in the wind?
It depends on what they're affixed to.
Because those guy wires
yeah.
are pretty high up, right? If
Yeah.
that's what you're fixing them to.
Yeah, there could be a rail that's placed in the wintertime between the poles that they affix to a more like a 1x1. It's a detail we have to kind of work through the manufacturer.
So they're permanent? They're,
They can
or are
removed. They can be
removed?
removed. Yes.
Oh,
After yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as what was the other thing? Oh, the wind screens.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't. I guess I either wasn't paying attention or I didn't hear whether those are the rails that hold them in place. Are they permanently affixed to the?
No, those are removable to put in the sleeves. And the sleeves are just little brass plates. Maybe
I'm kind of
square.
not into any of that stuff because I know the restaurant people probably will feel differently, but I think it's just another thing that's going to be required to be stored somewhere at some point, during the nicer times of the year. And we really, as far as inclement weather, we don't have a lot of it, so I don't think creating more stuff to is that good of an idea. I appreciate what they can potentially do, but if they become objects that are just another thing to clutter up the cleanliness of this space, so I would opt personally to just not do either of those.
Yeah, I agree. And in previous meetings, there was a lot of discussion about how the tents became objects that were blocking views. These have all the same characteristics. And I agree with George that the weather, how many bad days do we have? We wish we had more rain.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Mark or Sue?
Pendants. Oh, sorry.
I agree. I think it looks a lot better with just having it open.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
On the pendants, on the heating, the pendants. Now, is this become a maintenance thing? Who installs and removes these pendants? Is this done by the city? Is it done by the individual restaurant owners?
I think it'd be more of a city thing.
And so these, option one mounted, do these relate to the public seating areas on the south side of the promenade as well as to the restaurant areas?
It could.
Yeah.
Because we have the poles on both sides.
But then you have to have some sort of metal that isn't
Yeah.
a cable.
Correct. It's
Yeah.
mounted between the poles
Okay.
coming across.
Yeah. So that would have to be permanent,
Um,
probably.
Probably, but we can look into that for the research.
I like the pendant. I think it's cool.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a consensus. I think we're done with that one. You have clarity, Louis? Let's go to the retail views. I'm not sure there's a whole lot there. I mean, does anybody disagree? We should have good views into the retail.
I don't disagree with that.
The K-rail design, I guess there was a,
Question, Steve,
Sure.
about that? Are we gonna, so we have lanterns in the trees. Are we gonna uplight the trees? Did we decide not to uplight the trees? What was our last, we had a lot of discussion about that before.
We decided not to uplight the trees.
Because water going in the,
Yeah, and also, it does have it has more of a urban space quality versus who we are, where the lighting happens in different ways. We use the trees as lights, basically.
you might put lights in the trees.
Yeah, lights in the trees, yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks for that.
No, it's definitely a more magical vibe.
We also talked about between the poles, we have the option of doing the
Cafe
string
lights,
lights, seasonal string lights as necessary. Again, it's about the flexibility of the lighting system. So the poles will be electrified, so we can do that.
K-rail, do we like the existing planners or do we want to do something different?
The K-rail, I respect it needs to be there. It's a Caltrans object, safety, it's very dangerous there. And I think converting it into a green wall as is being proposed is a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of the planters that are there today. They're too bulky.
Okay.
Yeah.
but they're so beautiful with the City of Laguna Beach logo.
Which is a whole nother topic. So
Yeah. Can we talk about the City of Laguna Beach logo someday?
I would like to. Yeah, I think this is a cleaner.
Okay, so we have consensus.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the Central Plaza element, you've basically, I guess there's two issues here. You've relocated it to where it's on axis with the Bouchard's walkthrough, which I think is very logical. Shall we talk about what is it a little bit? And I'm just wondering if we even need to decide that right now, or if the vertical element or whatever goes on there could be its own program. Could be 100 different things.
It's definitely, it'll definitely act as like, meet me by the whatever it is.
Yeah. And I like having something vertical that's structural. I think it's a good addition.
I did mention that at the base, we also anticipate two 12-inch seating steps that, you can kind of sit around the base of it and meet someone there.
I guess one question is, and there's two questions here. Do we want to try and make a decision of what it is, or do we want to say it's a program to be, led by the Arts Council or whatever? But the other question is the presence of water. Do we want to have water or do we want to not?
I always bring up the thing about, us being, the water-wise city of the universe, that, you create a water feature, it becomes a maintenance thing constantly. And, does it speak to our water-wise, enthusiasm, versus it being just an interesting object, or the other thing is it could be something that, say, every 3 years or so, it could be changed, so that it's a sort of an ever evolving or changing thing. I don't know if that's even practical or not. That's just a thought I had, but I think adding something with some color there might be a pretty interesting thing to do. Whether it's a Marlowe thing, there's plenty of other artists in town that could make a proposal, and that would be something that would maybe be a competition through the Arts Commission.
Well, if I agree that with not having standing water in a basin sitting around, but on the other hand, you could have a vertical element or an object and then have, disappearing water, which could be turned on for special events, and it could be fun for the kids, but it isn't a basin of sitting water. It could interact with whatever the object is or not and be there. And I'd like to see movable chairs around that object, rather than a fixed, so that it just blends into the forest, and rather than feeling more like an object in a plaza because this isn't a plaza. This isn't, as much as we talk about these great urban spaces around the world, this isn't a plaza. This is something very different.
Mark?
So that it's an interesting point that Susan just made regarding the seating around it. I'm just kind of processing that right now. And I wonder if it would be worth looking at that, Sean, with and without the seating around it. I also do think it would be interesting to consider some water, maybe not standing water. But,
Yeah. We were suggesting perhaps just a stream of water that it comes out on all four sides.
And just trickles
towards the
down.
bottom, maybe lifted 4 or 5 feet from the bottom, but then.
I mean,
falls
some of the
into
most
it.
elegant little plazas in Europe
great.
are just a single spigot of water flowing out, and it's
Yeah.
and it's this and in my mind, it's really the sound of water is
Exactly.
the most important thing.
Well, the only thing I brought up about it is, I'm just going to use Marlowe's obelisk as an example. If the water, came out of the top and then shimmered down all four sides of it and then went into an invisible basin.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're struggling with how to make the water so you can see it over the tile if that happened.
Oh, you would see it because the tile has texture. So even
Okay,
on
textured tile.
even on a sheet of glass, if you look at fountains where the water streams down on just a flat sheet of glass, it still does ropey kind of things. So it's even on a smooth surface, you're gonna get like a texture.
Yeah, I think it can be explored. The other aspect of water, which is a very pricey idea, is a fog fountain at the base. So at night it's wafting up and that fog is uplit. We had to have that feature in some of our projects, but they're very, very expensive. So in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and
Okay, so we like the idea of water and the presence of water, and I mean, and the idea of it being a freestanding program of what it is, process. And I really love the idea of it changing every 3 or 5 years. I think that's really a cool idea, if we can afford it, to be determined. Okay, I think we have that one.
so the feature, excuse me, Steve,
Yes.
so the feature could be changed every 4 or 5 years is what you're suggesting?
That was
Maybe.
suggested, maybe.
Which is fine. I like it. I'm just, so we would design it to accommodate that option, right?
yeah, that could be done.
And I think it's an interesting,
I do
yeah.
too, yeah. Because it sounds like the art folks that were a part of the process were kind of adverse to static art. And so
Yeah.
this would allow it to have something that is there all the time, but isn't necessarily
It could be
long-term
sizable,
static.
but it could be hollow inside, so reduce the weight, so it can be easily picked up and moved and removed, but also fixed in a solid way.
Let's talk about bollards. They're not very long.
Okay.
Any objections to the recommended approach to the bollards?
I think it's fine. My only suggestion, I like to try, because we have a lot when we do undergrounding in Laguna, there's all the telecommunication boxes that need to be and transformer boxes and all this stuff. And I've been trying to always suggest, instead of the typical green or the typical gray or light green gray and all the stuff that typically comes with those things, is like, can't we paint them like a dark brown or a dark green or something, so they kind of disappear a lot more? And I think with these, my only suggestion would be to find something other than gray to, we've got all this brick, so something that was either a darker red brown or a dark green or something, so that they really do kind of disappear into the landscape.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah,
I mean, it's
there's,
just a
yeah.
color option. It's not
Mhm. We
changing
can show some
what they
color
are.
options. Yeah, absolutely.
That's all.
Is this your specific recommendation? This
was a specific recommendation, but we actually did entertain a dark brown at one time. So, and even, started with a brushed silver, which you see, but that's more urban and doesn't really fit, I think, with what we're trying to do here.
I think anything that just looks earthier would be.
Yeah.
I think we have to mention, one of the speakers suggested that these become more artistic and more of an expression of kind of the art history of the community. Is there any interest in that idea?
I don't think you need to, because of what there's such a functional thing. I think that to create something that's more ornate in some ways is just going to draw more attention to them versus having them just kind of disappear.
What's the spacing on?
6 feet on center. So with the width of this, which is about so wide, they're about 5 feet between each other.
Okay, so they're a foot, each of them.
Well, I take that back. We're looking for something a little more slender than a foot, maybe
8 inches or something.
yeah, 8 inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how tall are they? Oh, just roughly 42?
Yes, 42. And they'd be crash rated, obviously. That's the whole purpose.
Are we satisfied with that direction? Okay. I hate to announce that we're on our last item.
Oh, wait, we've got all kinds of other comments and stuff, though.
Yeah, we have some more comments that we have to make sure we cover, all the questions if we haven't talked about them. Let's talk about not just the grates, but I think we should. Can we talk a little bit about the flood issue? Because I think a valid point was made about the function of curbs and gutters. That's why we have curbs and gutters, is to control stormwater.
Yeah, I think we need to work with Tom to determine the appropriate width of the trench drain. Typically, they're about 6 inches wide. We actually doubled that to 12. He said just oversize it, for obvious reasons. They could even be wider still if they need to be. But importance is that it's a flexible system. That these panels can be lifted out and they run a hose and clean it out once a year.
I think the point was a little bit different. And that is, when we have 100 or 200-year flood, it doesn't matter how big the grates are. It's going to flood. There's going to be 6 inches of water, that's running down that street. And I mean, I guess this is a decision point we've passed a long time ago, I guess. But it is a little because when you have the curbs, you have a 6 by 30 foot wide flood control channel before it comes up into the stores. If it's completely flat, you don't have that. I mean, the flood comes into the stores immediately. And I guess my question is there any way other than going to a curb, back to a curb, which I think we're past that.
I think the choice here, again, is the depth of that channel beneath this grate could be such, it could be, as much as, depending on the location of the existing pipe down the middle of the street, it could be 2 feet deep. That channel could be really deep, so it can carry a lot of water beneath that grate.
Well, isn't it also that, when you're sort of creating a grade there that, at the storefronts themselves and then towards the center.
Yeah,
of
the storefront slope towards it at 1%.
Right.
Right.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, does the entire space have a grade, from the storefront to the center of the street? That would allow some volume to be carried before it got up to the doorway.
Yeah, right now we have the center of the street as a high point and it's crowned towards the trench drain on each side at 1%.
So it's the opposite.
It's the opposite of what you described.
So it's directing the flood to the.
But I think this is a question we could pose with Tom and Public Works to determine as, the appropriate this is a civil engineering question.
Right.
It's over my pay grade.
Yeah, some of the earlier conversations that we've had with Tom is the drainage profile will essentially look like a W. The ridge line through the center of the street drains towards the grate, from the storefronts out drains towards the grate. And I do want to note that a lot of the drainage coming from the roofs of these buildings is currently being dumped out on the sidewalk. And the idea for this is to also have catchment basins at the ends of these gutters coming down the buildings to be rerouted. So there's no excess water. It's only basically water falling on the street itself. These DG or gravel areas also act as an infiltration basin that's not routed through the stormwater drainage. It's allowing to infiltrate back to the soil. So that's another avenue of offset that's not currently out there.
As far as these grades go, when I'm looking at option 1 or 2, I have a real thing about sort of these kind of patterns that cause your eyes to wiggle. I mean, I don't know that everybody. It makes me feel like I'm going to have a seizure or something when I look at those things. So, I mean, it's true. I'm just, so I mean, I think the simpler, whether there's other alternative grade pattern, but I would personally, I'd stay away from the ones that cause optical issues.
Could be just a simple linear lines, series of lines.
I mean, the option 1 is functional and it's not overstated. It's not something that you go, oh, it's a high art piece. It's a functional thing and it's got a little bit of variations. That's where I would go. But it's just because I have personal issues with things that cause my eyes to flutter.
I agree.
I agree as well. Any contrary opinions?
Couple of things. Back to the water drainage. We do have a hydrologist, correct?
Not currently, no.
So we're just going to leave it up to the civil then?
I think we should talk to Tom and see what he recommends,
Okay. And the crown, if I'm remembering correctly, it would be interesting to understand that elevation between the middle of the street and the storefronts. I don't think it's that far off because it's fairly crowned, so.
Yeah, looking at the existing profile, the crown of the street itself is actually pretty close to being level with the curb line, the sidewalk. It's very marginally different, maybe less than an inch.
Yeah.
At the threshold of the retail building, typically we have a 1/2 inch step up to the
Mhm.
finished floor of the inside the space.
Right. I guess my point is the street is not holding water beyond like we think it is, from.
Yeah, because
curb to
existing, there is a big crown in the middle.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's the water.
Oh, it would be along the curbs. It would be holding water.
Yeah. I do agree with the dizziness of the undulating pattern there, but let me ask about the color. Is this the color that you were thinking about on option number 1 for the bollards?
We
Something more?
would match the color of the tree grate, whatever that color might be. The tree grate, we're showing basically more of a brown, cast iron brown color.
So this is cast iron?
Yes. And that could also be the color of the bollards that George earlier described. So they all kind of start to match.
So is the finish going to wear off of them?
No.
If we think it is, should we consider bronze?
Very expensive that the amount that we're talking about. So is that true, Evan?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is more expensive, but they do offer it in bronze. It's not abnormal for these grades to be bronze, just it is more expensive.
Yeah, bronze is considerably more expensive than a cast iron. That's all.
I'd be interested in seeing the price of both.
Me too.
Okay. I think we've completed our list.
Did we
Louis?
talk about the tree grate?
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
Oh,
tree grade.
I'm sorry.
And what we're seeing here are 2 tree grades, but there's a lot of different options there, patterns, but we wanted a pattern that, was striking and simple at the same time. But also the other option, of course, speaks to the idea of nature.
Thoughts? I mean, and I'm based on the pattern of our discussion, we want to have one, not a variety. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I think a more organic approach is appropriate. And this one sort of starts doing your optical
It does.
dizzy thing. And there are options. This one isn't bad because it's rather refined. Some of them are organic but not refined.
Mhm.
This is the level of detail is
Yeah.
appealing.
And at the quantity, again, we can work with the manufacturer on the exact pattern. If the one on the right is what you're talking about, that could be adjusted.
I mean, don't we have a number of various conditions on the existing trees where you have exposed roots and?
Yeah, again, we're waiting the arborist report. I noticed there's really just 2 trees where the roots are lifting up. But the collars those are adjustable. So it's about the collar size.
Okay, so you just make the collar bigger.
Exactly.
So we won't have a problem installing these grates flush with the paving.
I hope not. The
Yeah.
idea is right now we have rather large grates, or 8 by 8 for a reason, because at the edge of the grate, there's a curb beneath of it with a compacted subgrade. We want to get that curb and compacted subgrade as far away from the trunk as we can to, for the health of that existing tree, minimize the disturbance. The advantage we have is the eucalyptus is a carrot root, those roots go straight down. So that's a good thing for us, and we hope not to encounter, like you have a ficus, it's a different thing, right? Those roots are going like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So projects I've worked on and seen of this sort of character where it's small, relatively small project, very high profile, we would be doing silva-cells to maximize the health, optimize the health of the trees.
Yeah.
And to accelerate growth.
For those of you who may not know what that means, silva-cell is basically it's a plastic geogrid, but the profile is very deep and allows for greater friability of the soil, loose soil, to exist around the tree. And we would use it underneath the paving, where we have the brick. So you can still have the 8-foot by 8-foot tree grate, which is fantastic. But then beyond that, you can have a zone, additional, 4 feet collar around that area beneath the paving, where you have the silva-cell, which allows for greater friability of soil. And it does, like Steve, you mentioned, there's a difference in the health of the tree.
It's fairly dramatic.
Yeah. We would not install those in the existing trees, though, because you already have, the roots. They don't need that. It's the new trees.
And of course, the infrastructure under the street has to be such that it allows space for it. So,
and from what we see, the infrastructure of the street is very minimal. It's just really that central existing drain pipe that's right down the middle.
I mean, that's a question that you don't have to decide now, but it could be an added alt on the bids to just see because they're expensive. But I've seen, streets where literally like one row of street trees was done by the city and the other row of street trees was done by the developer, and one had silva-cells and one didn't. And within 3 years, you never would have guessed they were planted at the same time. I mean, it was like a 50% difference in health and size.
That's something worth spending your money on.
I would agree.
Okay. Anything we didn't cover? I want to go back, Louis, to the list of questions. One question that came up was, and I'm not sure it's within the scope of this meeting, but that is the impact, the duration of construction. And let me ask the question this way. Is there anything we can do with the design that reduces the length of disturbance in front of the retail stores?
Yeah, we need to look at that idea. I think it's very important. But one idea is, of course, is you demo, the paving against a series of storefronts as quickly as possible. First ask the contractor, work with them, how fast can we do the demo? Replace that demoed area with maybe a temporary deck to allow access to that storefront while they're doing other areas. And we can do, sections at a time, whether they're the promenade area against the retail as one piece, and then the central piece is another project.
Another alternative is to arrange the construction schedule during off hours, if it's at night, or if the city's willing to kind of pay the overtime or any potential, night disturbances that may occur.
But there would be time, though, after, the sidewalk is demoed and it's just dirt before the new paving is installed. There's time between that happens. So that's what I'm talking about, is how to provide access to those stores where someone could be like pallets, whatever they are, that are not trip hazards.
Well, and I think you're suggesting too that it's not like Okay, let's demo the entire length of the street.
No, no.
Okay, and then, and that takes, 3 weeks or something, and then it just sits, and then we pave you're talking about there could be an incremental.
Do it in sections.
Do it in
Sequencing.
sections.
Could we have a construction phasing plan for our next meeting?
At least from what I understand, that's best done by the general contractor. So I think that's maybe a point of discussion that we can have to figure out what we're comfortable with. But I think ultimately there would, figure that schedule and what works best.
Yeah, we could talk to a general contractor offline to get some, as an advisor for something like this. Yeah.
Yes, just to give us a little
Absolutely.
reassurance.
Yeah.
So we've talked about that. One of the problems that we ran into, Susan, is that because of the, being the city and the way it goes about its processes, it interferes with the process if you talk to any of these guys prior. Right, but if they're not bidding on it, then we can, correct?
I'll defer that to Louis.
So as part of the focus groups that we had with the restaurants, the retailers, as part of the bidding process the city will undergo, the contractor will have to provide a staging plan, and that had to be documented as part of the bid. And we've communicated that we would share those with the restaurants, retailers, so they're aware of the staging plans and the efforts that are going to be taken to mitigate the construction.
Well, yeah, and every project does that. I guess what we're saying here is that there would be written in the general conditions in the bid package that the staging plan has to take minimal retail disturbance into consideration. Any other questions that we didn't address?
I had one thing, and I know this was maybe Sean, you and I talked about it, and it was potentially just a concept, but it was about the breezeway to the alley and the restrooms, potentially opening that completely up to the sky. And I don't know if that's if depending on who owns that piece of ceiling there, if that's even a feasible thing. But I don't want it to get in the way of progress, But it's
the addition of light in that space, I think, is critical to its success. And I would defer that question to Louis and the ownership question of how that could be.
I don't know if that's been
studied.
even discussed with. I don't know who owns that little piece. Bichards does. Has there been any conversation with the ownership and whether or not they'd be amenable to something like that?
We've had some initial conversation with them during our focus groups meeting about the breezeway, and they seemed open from our understanding during those conversations, but obviously we'd have to dive more into that with more details.
That could be a later on thing, I guess, but I mean,
and there's also the option of not opening the whole thing if you can't do that, but the core
pieces of it.
Pieces of it,
Yeah.
Well, so you're assuming that's part of your scope of work or not?
Well, right now, yes, we can, from the ground plane, that's our scope of work, nothing to do with the architecture itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for now, as a placeholder, you're showing the quilt brick. But do you have other thoughts about that space?
Yeah, it could be the herringbone. There was a comment made about there's a lot of spills that happen in that space, so which is the herringbone would be more easier to maintain in that regard. The key point of that space also, besides the light, is the steps that we have at the alley side, and we want to remove those steps and create a handicap accessible ramp, which is about 30 feet long towards the tail end, which we are relocating the existing door at Bichards. They're willing to do that, so they've already been spoken to about that, right, Louis?
Yes, and I think it's important to note that there's a public benefit to that because it leads to the restrooms, but we've had discussions, we'll continue to have discussions with them on that.
So that would need to be, it should be ADA accessible to get to the bathroom, shouldn't it? Or,
Whoops.
yes?
Are we getting a little in the detail? Let's stick back. Let's go back.
I'm going to open the public hearing for
Scope here.
one last
Can
question.
I answer one
Oh, yeah,
of the
sure.
questions
Yes.
that was on the list about the success and the programming? But we are going to put a lot of effort into figuring out the programming.
The excitement factor. Yep.
Right. So Yeah.
Yeah, that came up in a number of other hearings, was that for this to truly be kind of a catalyst for the renaissance of retail in Laguna Beach, it needs programming. And it needs to be active, it needs to be exciting, and needs to be highly used. So that's going to be another cost, but probably best money we would spend on the whole thing.
I think if we can get planning commission review of the umbrellas, I'm not sure if that was touched on with much detail, or if we can recap what they.
We didn't really give you direction on that, did we? Yeah. So what is your recommendation on the umbrellas?
I like the idea of white and an accent color, so 2 colors.
And then you have sort of smaller individual umbrellas that are scattered through the tables versus the large kind of group umbrella. Are you suggesting doing both of those depending on the location, or just sticking with one or the other?
We can certainly do both with a larger table needs. Personally, I like the idea of one size moving through the space. But yeah,
I prefer the traditional umbrellas myself.
Well, what about the traditional market umbrellas, such as in the picture in Madrid?
Which picture?
The picture of the dining area in Madrid.
Oh, but we didn't see what those really are. Yeah, they were collapsed.
Yeah, well,
Those were really huge.
Those were fairly large.
Those had the post off to the side, not in the middle, I believe.
Isn't it a center post?
I don't think so.
Oh, it looks like they.
Oh, no.
No, there's
You're
a
right.
pole, there's a
They're
pole
on
off to the side.
Yeah.
These hang out over the space.
That's right, yeah. But rather the fuller cloth umbrellas, a little less contemporary than what is shown in these images, in your images.
I think the smaller individual umbrellas with, a mix of the white with a couple of colors is fine. The reason I'm saying that is because I think there's more flexibility in where those can be located, during,
you move them around
they
like we
can
did
move 'em
today. Oh, the sun's coming from the side.
Yeah,
it's
and
with
the larger ones with the extended arm and they have a huge weight on them in order to, I just think it's another thing that clutters up. Sorry. Apologies.
Yeah, I agree with George. It's another big object.
A big heavy weight that.
Yeah, I think the lightness of the smaller umbrellas are just make it a lot more practical, and they kind of fit the character of the community.
Yeah.
Consensus? Okay. All over the public hearing for one addition. Okay, no more, 3 questions.
No,
Okay,
it's the original song from the cartoon.
okay.
This question's actually from my experience as a PhD whose dissertation focuses on urban architectural design and its effects on communities and people, as opposed to as a family who owns a store here, because I've been studying this for 20 years. It's about the trees. I've heard many of you talk about trees impeding the views of retail stores. I would ask you to consider that from a different perspective, particularly from the coast. Those trees are part of the character of Laguna. They do not impede the retail stores. So I'm wondering, in terms of when you're making this evaluation, what exactly you're considering in that way, because, and also the sky in Laguna is magical through those trees, particularly the ones near the beach. And I happen to have, as a professor at a prominent art and design college, lots of photographs of that particular view, which I'd be happy to share with you all.
So you're talking specifically about the ficus trees
I
being
am.
removed, not
very-
the other trees, just the
No,
ficus.
because those are the entrance, okay? And it's not just a physical entrance. This is an emotional entrance. And those trees and that opening, and from whatever direction you're walking, driving, running, boating, swimming, they're there. And I think that that's a major historical piece, I don't know what you want to call it. So before just the seeing the beauty. And I love, by the way, I love hanging lanterns from trees. I do this all the time for parties at home. I think it's beautiful, and there might be really appropriate places for it, and maybe even there. But I would ask you, how exactly are you making that evaluation? Because if you trim it too much, you're taking something away. And this is the kind of thing that's giving me high blood pressure.
The current proposal, I think, would be to remove 3 of the 4 ficus trees and replace them with other trees that are more
And I think
consistent.
I encourage you to rethink that, please. I
Okay.
think it's a huge mistake.
Okay, thank you. One other,
And the benches.
Was there another question?
Mine has to do with the tables. George brought up option 2. He didn't like the tables up against the restaurants. Steve agreed with that. And then Susan said that she liked it. And then all of a sudden it became okay. And I don't know if this is set in stone, but it became let the restaurants decide. So you're going to let if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. I don't think it's fair to let the restaurants decide if they're going to put tables out there. How wide are those tables? For 2 people, then are they allowed to put a third person? So now that 15 feet of sidewalk, you've just taken away how many feet? And so now I'm in between 2 restaurants. So I'm going to have people walking. Here's all these tables. Oh, I don't want to hit that. Oh, look at those people. They're not even going to see my store. And then, so I think that if the idea is to open up the sidewalk, why are we putting more restaurant tables in there? I think that the restaurants are getting a lot of stuff here. And then again, about Steve, you had mentioned when Mark was talking about his frustration and my frustration with what is going on there now, that there's nobody policing anything. Steve, you had mentioned, go ahead and give them a little, they can have a little something. You've got to be exact on this. You can't say, oh, you can put a bus station here and you can put all your.
No, that wasn't my point. Wasn't to let them do that. The point was that despite good management, that is going to occur no matter what. And the impact, until it can be policed and removed, there would be less impact with a 15-foot walkway than it would be today with what's there. That was my point. It wasn't allowing it to happen.
Okay. Well, so hopefully.
I'm for
there'll be-
maximum
Okay.
Nazi management
With
program.
that said, I think you have a very good point, and I agree with you. I think that we are going to have to be very specific. And the reason I say that is because I think that we've been taken advantage of in the past, and I don't see it stopping unless we draw a line.
Well, and the other thing is we need to put in they're going to have a new CUP, and it needs to go, all this stuff has to go in their CUPs, including the alley.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And at some point, there was mention of letting the restaurants choose their own furniture, which I don't think we want that to happen.
No.
Okay, final and last question.
Comment and question. C-Star Hall of Fame, possibly geotags instead of having all of the information on the plaque. Love the rotating art program. For the fountain, possibly drinking water to fill your water bottles like in Rome. And question is, for the curb, is there going to be a curb at the crosswalk at the corner of Glenary and Forest? And also, is there going to be a safe loading and unloading area for public transportation that is going to be directly at that area?
Okay, thank you. I closed the public hearing. Points that were brought. No, I think that was it. Thank you.
And we're barely allowed to speak for 3 minutes.
Okay, I opened the public hearing. I mean, we just had an opportunity, so you should have taken it. So please take it now.
I can't walk that fast. I'm old. So what I want to say is I've sat and listened to all of this. I really believe that the public has to be more involved in asking all of you questions, in asking the architect questions. It's going to affect our livelihood, whatever you're doing here, whatever all of you are planning. We might not be able to, keep our store open, and we'll have to close down. And I believe all of you would enjoy shopping in our store. It's an experience. We sell beautiful shoes. We have people coming from all over. So if this thing is going to take forever, how are we going to live? Those are the basic questions that need to be addressed before. And I don't like a big vertical structure in the center of the street. We are not in Rome, where they have obelisks all over. We're in Laguna Beach. It's a very small area. You can't have something vertical over there. It really, obstructs the view. You're talking about the view from the mountains to the ocean, and suddenly something vertical in there. Maybe have a beautiful, garden or something. That's different.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Okay. We will close the public.
Come back.
And I will note that we did address the duration of the construction. There's a focused effort on trying to minimize that impact. So it was addressed. Now thank you very much. So would we like to reevaluate the removal of the ficus trees? Do I have a motion to reevaluate the removal of the ficus trees?
Now, one of the things that, so people are sensitive about trees in this town. And one of the things that happened to us, we were talking, remember when we had the downtown action plan, we had those, and we never voted on anything, but then people were.
There was an uproar. Yeah.
There was an uproar and then phony ads in the paper with no trees on Forest Avenue and all that nonsense that went on. But I do think that we do need to be sensitive about removing trees, because that's one of the things that people routinely bring up to me. Well, you're not going to take out the trees, are you? Even some of the trees that don't even look good and they're healthy, they're like, well, there's a few unhealthy looking trees. Even I know that. But I do think we need to be sensitive about removing trees. I get the point, but I don't want to fall on my sword on that, to be honest with you.
Well,
And I don't want to remove trees for the sake of removing trees. My point, and I'm very open to being educated on this, and I think Sean knows what I'm talking about, but there are those 2 trees that I look at all the time that are at the entry, and it seems as though they're competing with the other, there's 4 trees that are competing with one another, and there's actually a bunch of dead growth, and there's an unhealthy situation that's occurring there. I'm suggesting we take a look at it.
Okay, it sounds like an option for deferral.
Well, I think, if there's issues with trees growing into trees and health issues, in terms of completely removing them, I think just some timely pruning once in a while would do the trick. I don't think they have to be completely removed. I mean, unless there's a health issue or some other issue that's causing a big problem. But I think if it's simply something where, this tree's growing up underneath this other one and getting entwined, then, a careful pruning would suffice, I think.
Well, it could keep the trees and prune them up, but as it is now, it's dark, heavy, and it blocks the views into it. And the arborist is going to review the tree, correct? So that would be step 1. And if they can be saved, they could be pruned by the right arborist.
It's almost as though, and you can go, you'll start noticing now when you go to the inland side of Forest, when you look at the promenade, it seems as though the ficus are a big distraction from the eucalyptus.
I think they are. The eucalyptus are the star of the show.
I mean, the original.
This is what it's all about.
The-
Forest Avenue was eucalyptus. The whole downtown was eucalyptus. And the ficus was planted at some point, and now they're there and they're big. And, it is hard to remove trees, and people are attached to trees. I understand that. But they don't really support, our big idea.
Does the consultant have an opinion?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Susan. I mean, we plant a lot of trees, a lot of big ones too. So I'm not adverse to what needs to be done sometimes, the difficult decisions. I know that we can replace the ficus with whether it's eucalyptus or an oak or something, that right? Exactly.
Well, I was wondering
So,
earlier, I
yeah.
didn't ask the question, but,
Mhm.
you know, could the ficus be replaced with a heritage oak?
Yes, and, but located in the right positions, that's not block the views, et cetera, that, yeah.
Yeah.
The ones I'm talking about, I don't think there's room to replace a tree. Yeah, so you'll have to notice when you're there, there's several trees that are right next to one another at the entry.
I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, I'm always advocating for not removing trees. I don't even care if they're unhealthy. You know, I like, you know, if they're alive, you know, leave them, you know, and but I like the clarity of the eucalyptus statement going from one end to the other. I think it's more I think it's more dramatic if it's extended out. And to me, the ficus is a little argumentative to the bolder
Yeah,
landscape.
it creates a
statement.
lot of darkness. I think as a tree, we like a tree that creates a dappled shade, which the eucalyptus does do. The ficus is a very dense kind of a shade.
You know, I think we should have a discussion with the arborist and, you know,
Start there.
yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your input because it's changed, turned the tide a little bit. At least we're undecisive versus decisive. Do we want to reevaluate the question of tables blocking the sidewalk that we're so trying so hard to widen?
Yeah, I don't want to do that because the whole point of creating this 15-foot walkway is to get people walking past the stores and not, you know, not walking down the middle. And so we want more exposure to the retail. That's why we put the big walkways.
Yeah, I would, the only tables I would support would be two tops on the side, nothing out on the sidewalk edge against the building. That's it. Narrow tables.
Yeah, that might work.
And that's just right smack dab pushed up against the building. And you give them exact dimensions. I mean, the city is providing the furniture. So.
Yeah.
I mean, for what it's worth, I have to disagree. I think the plan demonstrates that even narrow tables up against the front of the building really don't allow people to walk without having to fairly dramatically detour around the trees. And I think it's an inconvenience and an obstacle. And I think we have plenty of tables for the restaurants. So I would advocate not allowing them up against the building.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I stated that in my opinion too, that I thought the two tops up against their already seated patio areas is just it's just too much. I think that you know, the restaurants are getting a lot of consideration here, and which is great. But I don't think you know, I think piling more on the what we're trying to achieve there with the 15-foot walkways, it's just that, you know, with people getting served there, and you know inevitably somebody's going to move one of those chairs, you know, to the outer part of the table. I just think they should just not be there. That's my opinion.
Mark?
I agree.
Sue? Afraid you're overruled?
Yes, I'm overruled.
Thank you for bringing that back up again and challenging us, because it gave us, allowed us to have a second thought. I think that concludes the agenda item 4.1. Is there any other business from staff tonight? Any other reports? Do I have a motion to adjourn to our next meeting, which is
March 5th.
March 5th?
Do we have any reason to make any further comment before we adjourn?
Would any of the commissioners or council members like to make further comment?
No, I'm just asking the question. Sorry.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move that we adjourn to the next regular planning commission meeting
Do I-
on March 5th.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Whiten?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Kellenberg?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for hanging in there and giving us your input. It's very valuable and appreciated.